the knight in the great world of American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1 Beginning. Arthur, you shouldn't do that. Lancelot is a good man. He deserves the title of knight. He saved me before. And he is a noble. The young squire Merlin took off the armor of the equally young Prince Arthur, while complaining about his prince's inhumanity. You can't throw him into the stable, that's what servants do. Shut up. You idiot. You are just a servant, you have no right to decide who gets the title of knight. The young prince threw his iron gloves on the shelf and scolded impatiently. But after the scolding, Arthur hesitated and pretended to explain his previous heavy tone. You'd better not let your words be heard by your father. Your father doesn't like servants discussing things they shouldn't discuss. But Merlin was indignant at the time that his prince failed to recruit an excellent knight, so he didn't care about the prince's scolding and explanation at all. After all, if you really count it, Merlin is a veteran. He didn't know how many times he had angered Arthur's father, the famous King Uther. But the strange thing is that King Uther, who was known as a tyrant in the outside world, actually forgave Merlin's mistakes again and again. Of course, this was not out of kindness, but because Merlin had a good teacher and a good friend. With the help of these two people, Merlin was able to get out of danger every time and get through the crisis safely. This also caused Merlin to become more and more courageous, even to the point of daring to forge a certificate of nobility. By the way, Merlin, which family did you just say that Lancelot was from? Arthur just remembered at this time that Merlin had introduced Lancelot's background. Arthur didn't care much at that time. He didn't think Merlin would introduce any great person at first. At that time, Arthur agreed to Merlin to let that Lancelot take the test, just because Lancelot saved Merlin from the griffin's mouth. He never thought that Lancelot could pass the test. Although the means were a bit above board, Arthur was still willing to give him a chance. Of course, there was no need to tell Merlin about this. Arthur was afraid that Merlin would tell Lancelot his thoughts. If this really happened, it would be pure cheating. This was not what Arthur wanted to see. In short, Arthur felt that Merlin did not make a mistake this time, so he now needed to understand this Lancelot. If he was really qualified, Arthur was willing to accept him as a member of the Knights Templar. But this unintentional question surprised Merlin suddenly. That's right, it was said before that Merlin forged the certificate of nobility for Lancelot. Lancelot is handsome, tall and strong, with a natural and impressive demeanor. Everyone who sees him fighting can't help but sigh that he is brave and good at fighting. In Merlin's opinion, if a person with all these excellent qualities cannot become a knight, then no one in the world is qualified to be a knight. But Lancelot has only one problem, that is, he is a commoner. A commoner whose ancestors have been farmers for generations, and even his ancestors for 8 generations have never been associated with a nobility. He is the 5th son of Lord Lysambia. Although Merlin appeared calm on the surface, he was actually panicking inside, because he made it up. Now he can only pray that Arthur has never heard of this family. Merlin chose Lancelot because he thought this family was too remote and low-key. I don't know if God heard Merlin's prayers and really let him get away with it. Oh, it's Lord Lysambia. Arthur's eyes were full of confusion, but he pretended to know on the surface. Arthur didn't want to be despised in front of his friend and attendant. Well, Arthur was a poor student. This guy's favorite thing since he was a child was to wield swords and guns. Over the years, apart from the court etiquette, he could barely recognize words. How could he remember all the nobles' coats of arms and family names? You know, the subject of noble heraldry is as many as 3 books, and each book is at least as thick as the bricks on the city wall. It's no problem for Arthur to use these books as shields, but to let him remember them all? Don't be ridiculous. Although Merlin and Arthur have only been together for a few months, Merlin still knows the character of this prince, who is so simple that he even looks a little silly. Seeing Arthur's character, Merlin knew that the matter was fooled. Since Arthur didn't know about this so-called Lysambia family, he naturally wouldn't continue the topic, so as not to show his weakness, and Merlin naturally didn't intend to continue the topic, just in time. So the two of them tacitly didn't talk about this topic anymore, just packed up and went to the restaurant. King Uther happened to be free today, so he planned to have a good meal with his son and daughter, so Arthur especially came back from the knights early today. Walking on the white corridor of the royal city, Arthur suddenly noticed that the roses in the garden had begun to bloom. Seeing this scene, Arthur suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at his servant. Merlin, what month is it now? Merlin was a little unresponsive to Arthur's sudden stop, and almost bumped into Arthur. At this time, Merlin was still thinking about how to help Lancelot. May? What's wrong? Is there anything special? Merlin knew that his prince was a fool who couldn't even put on clothes without his servants, and he was insensitive to other things except fighting. So he was not surprised at all that Arthur didn't know what year or month it was. He was just wondering why Arthur suddenly cared about this. May? In other words, it has been 10 years now? Kai? Arthur did not answer Merlin's question, but muttered to himself. Merlin felt a little strange when he heard Arthur suddenly spit out a name. It was the first time he heard this name. Kai? This name is really strange. But just when Merlin was about to ask who this Kai was, Arthur suddenly walked forward without saying a word. Merlin saw that Arthur, who is always full of energy on weekdays, suddenly became depressed, and he suddenly felt a little uneasy. After all, creatures like energetic idiots can always find reasons to make themselves high-spirited. Except for sleeping, such guys can never calm down. Now they suddenly become like this. Is the end of the world coming? When they arrived at the restaurant, Merlin noticed that the atmosphere today was a little strange. King Uther, Arthur and Arthur's sister Princess Morgana all seemed to be worried. Although King Uther was not a cheerful person, and the family usually had meals, it was not very lively, but they were a family after all, and the atmosphere felt tolerable, not like today, when the low pressure in the restaurant would squeeze out water, as if it would rain heavily at any time. Arthur casually used cutlery to pick up the food on the silver plate, lowering his head without saying a word. King Uther took his beloved golden wine cup, drank wine one sip after another, leaned against the tall backrest, stared blankly at the front, and no one knew what he was thinking. Princess Morgana, the gentle princess who always had a warm smile in the past, also lost her smile at this time. She just stared at the newly opened roses outside the window without saying a word. Seeing the beautiful and kind Morgana like this, Merlin suddenly felt distressed. The whole Camelot knew that Morgana was the most beautiful and kind princess in Camelot, and even the whole world. Her face could make the birds in the sky lose their minds and fall from the sky, and make the fish in the stream stunned and forget how to swim. Her beauty could also make the bright moon in the sky hide in the dark clouds, and it could also make the most beautiful flowers feel ashamed and wither. More importantly, Princess Morgana is also famous for her kindness. She is also the only one who dares to advise King Uther, although her advice is generally useless. After all, King Uther is a stubborn king. But her kindness is enough to make everyone grateful to her, and her good deeds in Camelot cannot be finished for 3 days and 3 nights. She is the dream lover of all men and the object of all women's longing. Merlin is no exception. Merlin used to live in a small village. The most beautiful woman he had ever seen was the daughter of the tavern owner at the east end of the village, a little woman with freckles on her face. As a result, when he saw Princess Morgana on the first day of Camelot, Merlin realized that there are really women in this world who are as beautiful as gods. At that moment, Merlin forgot about the tavern daughter at the east end of the village. Princess Morgana became his new dream lover. Seeing his dream lover so depressed and sad, Merlin hated it. Merlin was just thinking about it. He was just a servant. He had no right to comfort the princess, let alone anything else. As for King Uther and Arthur, Merlin didn't care. King Uther was a cruel king. Merlin didn't like him. Arthur was a fool. Who would worry about him? After a long time, Morgana spoke first. Father, is there really no news about Kay? No news at all? It is not difficult to hear a strong sense of luck in the words. Morgana is expecting her father to give a different answer. This is the second time Merlin has heard this name today. King Uther raised his head and looked at his 2 children. His usual serious and even gloomy expression finally loosened at this moment. It became sad and soft. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end he shook his head dejectedly. Morgana closed her eyes, turned her head to the other side, and covered her face with her hands. Arthur raised his head at this time and said loudly, Kay will be fine. He must have been delayed by something. He is the strongest knight. No one can defeat him. Not even death. Arthur's eyes were full of determination. King Uther wanted to comfort his children, but when the words came to his lips, he couldn't say them. Because he was also lucky, you know, compared with his own children, he was the one who had been with Kay the longest. He didn't know what others thought, But he himself knew that he had always regarded Kay as his own son, and even the same as Arthur. But as a king and as a father, he needed to let his children know what reality was, so King Uther was very entangled. Just when King Uther was about to make up his mind, the bells of Camelot suddenly rang. As the king of Camelot, he could naturally hear that it was the bells on the city wall. This meant there was an enemy attack. Chapter 2 Griffins and Warriors. Ling, 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 ding. The bells rang urgently, which meant that the enemy was strong. Guards. Guards. King Uther threw away his weakness at this time. His expression was as hard as iron, and he called out to the royal guards. A team of knights in red smocks rushed in immediately, each of them holding a weapon. Obviously, the situation was very urgent, otherwise no one would draw their weapons in the king's dining room. Yes, your majesty, what happened outside? King Uther asked calmly. As a king, King Uther would never show an expression that was not in line with the king's demeanor in front of anyone. Several knights obviously didn't know how to explain. King Uther was very unhappy with the knight's hesitation. Uther's father once taught him a sentence: don't confuse your subjects. When they ask you for an answer, you must answer without hesitation, even if the answer is made up. King Uther agreed with this sentence, and he also asked his subjects to do the same. Of course, he didn't say the last sentence. But if the ministers can't answer the king's questions in time, what's the point of having these ministers? Lion. You speak. King Uther didn't have time to deal with these guys, so he asked his most trusted Knight Lion to answer the question. Yes, your majesty. Knight Lion was a typical Celtic, with red hair and beard, slightly curled. Like the king he served, he was a serious and rigid knight. However, at this time, this knight who never hesitated in the past also spoke a little hesitantly, because he knew how great a sin it was to deceive the king. Although he didn't think that the soldier who reported the news would lie, the problem was that the answer didn't sound realistic. It's a griffin. Your majesty. The soldier saw a griffin flying towards Camelot on the city wall, but as a knight, Knight Lion could only answer his monarch's question truthfully. When King Uther heard the word griffin, his head was big. Recently, this monster has caused great damage to the surrounding villages. At least 50 people have been eaten, and the loss of property and livestock is countless. King Uther did not fail to organize soldiers to fight against it, but the problem is that the beast's body is as hard as iron. The weapons of the knights and soldiers have no effect on it. Instead, it will stimulate the monster's ferocity. For this reason, King Uther lost a lot of soldiers. What are you waiting for? Let the knights set off. King Uther was too lazy to care about the hesitation of the knights before. If this monster really entered Camelot, it would be a real disaster. Arthur didn't care about being depressed at this time. He immediately called his little friend Merlin and asked him to prepare armor and weapons for him. He was the commander of the knights and didn't have time to sit here. But at this time, Knight Lion called Arthur with a strange look on his face. Wait, your highness, what? Is there any more bad news? King Uther was a little nervous because of Leon's sudden surprise. Camelot City has been in a lot of trouble recently. Bad news is always followed by another bad news. King Uther has not had a good sleep for so many days. He is a little numb. No. I'm not sure if this is good news or bad news. I prefer to call it strange news. Knight Leon is not a person who likes to make jokes, but the news from the soldiers really makes him a little unsure. The soldiers report that the griffin is fighting with a person. King Uther was very dissatisfied with Knight Leon today. He spoke incoherently and did not have the rigor and stability that a knight should have. However, this strange news was not bad in King Uther's opinion. The rampage of the griffin before made many knights and soldiers afraid of fighting. Now someone dared to fight this monster, which was definitely an exciting news. When King Uther was about to give orders and reward this warrior, Knight Leon said all the unfinished news. They are fighting in the air. King Uther's words stopped in his throat. He looked at his knight with a surprised face and asked uncertainly, in the air. Merlin, who was just standing by, became alert after hearing this. After all, being able to fight with a griffin in the air, how could it be caused by magic? Merlin has always been very concerned about this aspect. Of course, there is another person who is also very concerned. Is it magic or witchcraft? King Uther's face, which had just been a little happy, immediately became solemn. Camelot prohibits all magic and witchcraft. Anyone who dares to have anything to do with magic in Camelot will be beheaded. There are no exceptions, and absolutely no mercy. And all this started with King Uther's decree. The iron-fisted monarch was most proud of the fact that the decree of Camelot had never been broken in his life. Anyone who dared to violate the decree would be punished in the most cruel way. King Uther was particularly concerned about magic, and any slight disturbance would alert the monarch. Upon hearing this, Arthur and Merlin looked at each other, and the helplessness in their eyes was obvious. Knight Lion and others were not surprised. After all, the name of the tyrant King Uther was not spread overnight. "I'm not sure, my majesty, at least the knights on the city wall didn't see any traces of magic. These knights of King Uther have killed countless wizards and sorcerers with King Uther over the years. They are still very familiar with some traces of spells. That warrior seems to be fighting on a griffin, at least that's the news I got." King Uther secretly breathed a sigh of relief. King Uther knew the weirdness of spells and witchcraft best. If possible, he didn't want to have anything to do with those ghosts in his life. Then King Uther became interested in the warrior who dared to fight the griffin in the air. King Uther had the same problem as any king of this era. He liked warriors, and the braver and more powerful the warriors were, the more they liked them. Then let's go and see the heroic figure of the warrior who dared to fight the griffin in the air. As he said that, he couldn't help but walk out first out of curiosity. Arthur and his father were the same, and they were full of good feelings for brave warriors. So he didn't even put on his armor, and rushed out in a hurry, not paying any attention to Merlin who was holding heavy armor and stumbling behind him. When everyone came to the city wall, the knights and soldiers on the wall were not concentrating on defense, but whistled and shouted for encouragement. As we all know, King Uther is a strict king, and it is not an exaggeration to say that he is a tyrant. So when he saw the chaos on the city wall, his face turned black like carbon. There was no demeanor of a Camelot warrior at all. But soon, King Uther didn't care about the disorganization and lack of discipline of his soldiers, because his mind was completely attracted by the battle in the sky. The cry of an eagle rang out in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a monster that was 5 meters long tumbling and struggling in the air. It was a dark blue monster with an eagle's head and a lion's body. This monster has been very popular recently. Many knights and soldiers have seen it, but every time they meet it, the ending is not very good. So no one has a good impression of this monster. Now that they see someone beating it up, of course they have to cheer it up. What's more, this monster's target this time is Camelot. They really don't want to face this monster again. It's not that they lack courage, but they really have no way. Their weapons are completely useless against this monster. How can they fight? So forget it. Now there is a warrior who can help them deal with this monster. They think this is good, and what's even better is that this warrior seems to have the upper hand all the time. Chapter 3 Cry. A shrill cry shocked everyone. The griffin was dying. Although they were cheering before, they didn't see anything. The griffin could fly very well. The battle just now took place at an altitude of 100 meters. The people below could only see a small dot flying around in irregular lines in the air. They couldn't see it clearly. At most, they saw a human figure constantly slashing at the griffin with a long sword. Although the monster didn't bleed, the painful screams showed that the warrior had caused a lot of damage to the monster. What's more exciting is that the monster's scream just now was obviously full of fear and pain. As long as the soldiers with experience know, the monster is dying. Sure enough, after that piercing scream, the rolling dot in the sky began to grow larger and they were falling. At this time, people also saw the figure fighting with the griffin. It was a golden knight. But after everyone saw the armor on the knight, the first thought in their minds was, a lion. Because there are too many lion elements on the gorgeous knight's armor that is interwoven with gold and silver. There are carvings of roaring lions on both sides of the knight's shoulder armor, and the same is true on the front of the knight's breastplate. These lion carvings are so lifelike that everyone seems to see the lion roaring at themselves as the knight moves. On the knight's body, the blue smock has been torn into strips of cloth, but a roaring lion pattern can be vaguely seen from the strips of cloth. This may be the knight's emblem. Just when everyone's attention was focused on the fight between the knight and the griffin, no one noticed that King Uther's face changed. His face was surprised, unbelievable, and at the same time, there was a trace of expectation that could not be concealed. Of course, he could not forget this emblem. The roaring lion emblem. This is the new family emblem he personally awarded to his child, Kai, the child he had high hopes for. Just now, he thought he would never see this emblem again in his life, but he didn't expect that in the next moment, what he thought was impossible happened in front of him. But King Uther didn't dare to verify it. This was very weak and didn't fit King Uther's personality, but King Uther still couldn't speak. He was afraid of disappointment. This might be considered an alternative escape. But he still did it, a bit self-deceiving, but King Uther still chose to be weak. Arthur, on the other hand, watched with relish. He admired the bravery of the warrior and envied the knight's armor. It was too gorgeous. In Camelot, a set of ordinary knight armor also requires a full 200 gold coins, which is equivalent to almost 40 cows. But the lion-roaring armor on this warrior, Arthur conservatively estimated that at least 5,000 gold coins were needed. Arthur felt that he could only imagine this price in his dreams. He believed that his father would not pay such a large sum of money for him. Although King Uther had the name of a tyrant, to be honest, his private life was not decadent. On the contrary, he was very self-disciplined. He was a very frugal king, whether for himself or his son. It was impossible for him to pay for such a fancy armor for his son. With a panicked scream of the griffin, everyone could see more clearly. It turned out that this warrior who came from nowhere tied the griffin with a golden rope. It was with this rope that the warrior could fight the griffin in the air. But this also made everyone admire the courage of this warrior even more. He dared to fight a griffin in the sky with just a rope. I really don't know whether to describe him as skilled and daring or too reckless. The rope tied one wing and one front paw of the griffin, which greatly restricted the griffin's flying movements, making its movements extremely unsmooth and looking a little shaky. It was also because of this that the griffin's attack was not coherent and the rope was very awkward, which gave the knight the opportunity to beat the griffin. As the griffin fell rapidly, the people watching the show began to exclaim. They didn't know what would happen to the griffin after falling from such a high place, but the knight would definitely be in big trouble. Perhaps the shouts of the crowd reminded the knight. Just when the griffin was about to fall behind the city wall, the knight grabbed the rope and used the griffin's struggling force to swing and land on the griffin's back. Then he used the rope in his hand to strangle the griffin's neck, stepped on the griffin's neck with one foot, and pulled it back desperately. This pull actually pulled the griffin's head up hard. The griffin was pulled up by this pull, and its body was unconsciously pulled up. However, it was too close to the ground at this time. In addition, the rope on the griffin's wings was always tightly wrapped, and the griffin had no spare energy to lift its body immediately. So the man and the beast crashed directly into a house not far from the city wall. In Camelot, all the buildings are made of stone, so this collision is absolutely earth-shaking. Fortunately, there was a bell to remind when the griffin attacked before, so the residents near the city wall had already run to the city center to take refuge, which did not cause other casualties. The besiegers on the city wall immediately ran to the inside of the city wall to continue watching the show. Fortunately, King Uther was a ruler of the right level. He was not dominated by the mentality of eating melons, but made the most correct choice. He drew the long sword from his waist, pointed in the direction where the griffin fell and issued an order. Camelot. Attack. Only then did the besieged knights and soldiers react. This was not the time to watch the show. Now was the best opportunity to deal with the griffin. The griffin must be seriously injured. If it ran away, the ordinary people of Camelot would be the ones who would suffer in the end. So one by one, they immediately rushed down the city wall. Just as they rushed down the city wall, there was a sudden sound of stone cracking in the collapsed houses, and a huge monster broke through the shackles of the ruins and flew out. It was a griffin. It's not dead. But looking at its messy feathers and hair, and the blood flowing from its forelimbs and head, it's not doing well either. Seeing this, the soldiers and knights unconsciously quickened their pace. The griffin is a magical creature. Unlike ordinary beasts, it is very smart. The moment it wakes up, it knows that it must retreat, otherwise it will not be able to leave. So the moment it rushed out of the ruins, it was ready to run away. But when it turned around and planned to fly into the sky, a huge force came from its throat, wings, and front paws, and the huge force directly flipped the griffin to the ground. The rope on its body has not been untied yet. Ha ha ha, it's so easy to catch you, how can I let you escape? At this time, a hearty male voice came out from the ruins. Now is round 2. It turned out that the knight who was fighting with the griffin was fine, and he didn't know when he tied the rope in his hand to a large stone pillar. Part of the large stone pillar was deeply buried in the ground. It was quite solid and there was no risk of the griffin breaking free. As soon as the man finished speaking, he untied a big axe from his waist and rushed towards the griffin. The griffin reacted quickly. After hearing the man's voice, it immediately turned over and rushed in the direction of the man. Seeing the man rushing towards it with a battle axe in hand, the griffin immediately rushed forward with a fierce look in its eyes. It knew very well that if it wanted to escape, it had to deal with this man. The griffin was very large, standing at almost 2 meters at the shoulder, and it rushed with great momentum. But the man on the opposite side didn't care at all, and instead accelerated the speed of the charge. At the moment when the two were about to touch, the griffin suddenly stood up, and then used its 2 front paws to grab the man's head from a high position. This attack was definitely unexpected. Although the man reacted very quickly, he was still hit on the head by the griffin's front paws. Fortunately, the man's reaction saved his life. At the moment when the griffin's front paws hit the man's head, he made a backward movement and did not let the griffin's sharp claws grab it firmly. This attack only took the man's lion visor helmet away, and the knight himself dodged the attack. Although the griffin's power still caused the man to roll over, he turned over the next moment and rushed to the side of the griffin. Just as the man rushed to the side of the griffin, his body rose up from the ground as if it was equipped with a spring, and at the same time, he swung the battle axe in his hand and hit the griffin's head fiercely. Clang! A huge sound of metal and iron rang out. Except for the sparks flying, the griffin did not seem to be hurt, but the huge force still knocked the griffin's body crooked. Before the griffin could recover, the man's attack followed one after another. The man did not care about the recoil from the battle axe at all. Instead, the attack became more fierce. The movement trajectory of the battle axe in the man's hand could hardly be seen. Clang 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 clang. The 7 consecutive and non-stop attacks all hit the griffin's head, and they were in the same position. When the attack stopped, the griffin's huge body fell to the ground like a felled tree and never stood up again. At this time, King Uther finally arrived with his men. The man also turned around and looked at everyone. When he saw King Uther who was in the front, the man smiled widely. When King Uther saw the man, he was stunned, his eyes full of disbelief. The man did not care about the king's stunned state, but naturally put a battle axe on the ground, put his left hand on the top joint of his right arm, knelt on one knee, lowered his head and said, "Hail to you, my king." Arthur was a few steps late because he had to help Merlin who was lagging behind. When he arrived, he just saw this scene. Chapter 4 Uther's adopted son. Hearing someone calling his name, Kai raised his head. Although it was quite rude to raise his head without getting a response from the king, Kai and King Uther were too familiar with each other, so he didn't care about it at all. Anyway, he was sure that King Uther would not punish him for such a small matter, although King Uther had always been known as a tyrant. "Arthur," Kai said a little uncertainly when he saw the big boy with blonde hair in front of him. After all, when he left, Arthur was only 8 or 9 years old. 10 years is enough for a person to completely change. "It's really you, Kai?" Arthur didn't care so much. After confirming that the person in front of him was his brother, Arthur completely ignored the royal etiquette and rushed over rashly, hugging Kai who stood up. "It's really you, my brother. I knew it, you wouldn't break your promise. You're really back. You're really back." Kai, who stood up, was a little helpless to catch his rash brother. At such a big age, he still likes to jump on others. I don't know where he learned this bad habit. However, after hearing Arthur's excited words, Kai also put away his helpless expression, and instead hugged Arthur with a smile, and patted Arthur's back vigorously. Of course, a knight never breaks his promise. After hugging for a while, Kai put Arthur down. Arthur also noticed something wrong at this time. There was nothing wrong with hugging, but jumping on someone else was indeed a bit ugly. After all, Arthur, was a qualified knight, not a child anymore. After putting Arthur down, Kai smiled and walked towards King Uther on the side. Although King Uther was also very excited, it would be better to kill him than to make him as disrespectful as Arthur. Of course, Kai knew King Uther's habit of saving face, so he decided to take the initiative to greet him. Kai walked up to King Uther, hugged him, patted him on the back, and whispered, "I'm back, Uther. This is not disrespect, but a family name, which is very normal in foreign countries, especially in ancient times." King Uther then stretched out his hand with a little trembling, gently stroked Kai's hair, and said with a slightly excited voice, "It's good to be back, it's good to be back." Faced with this change, the crowd also began to whisper. Some people who didn't understand the situation were privately asking what was going on. Merlin was one of them. He secretly pulled Knight Lion's arm and asked, "What's going on? Who is this Kai?" Lion saw that it was Merlin who was pulling him, So he whispered to explain, "That's King Uther's adopted son, Sir Ector's third son, Sir Kai, known as the Lion Knight. He left Camelot 10 years ago, saying he was going to travel around the world. I didn't expect him to come back today, because the occasion was not appropriate." Lion didn't go into details, but just gave a general explanation. "This is Merlin. If it were any other servant, Leon would have wasted his saliva. Merlin is very special in Camelot. Although he is a servant, his status is not low. First of all, he is the apprentice of Gaius, the court pharmacist. In Camelot, Gaius has a high reputation. This learned pharmacist is not only an outstanding doctor, but also an important advisor to the king, so his status is very high. Secondly, Merlin is also the prince's attendant. In the court, the development potential of attendants is very large. After all, they are the closest people to the prince. Although Merlin is a civilian, it may not be the case when Arthur ascends the throne. What's more, Arthur and Merlin have a very good personal relationship, which can be seen from the fact that Arthur takes him everywhere. At least Leon will not treat him as an ordinary servant. Merlin also understands that Knight Leon can't tell him too much at this time, but others have told him the key news anyway. Anyway, as long as you know that this knight named Kai is very close to King Uther's family. However, Merlin was also a little surprised that Arthur had never told him about Kai before. King Uther was not a king who liked tenderness. On the contrary, this old-fashioned and stubborn middle-aged man was not used to expressing his feelings. So after a brief tenderness, King Uther immediately suppressed the excitement in his heart. He coughed a few times, pointed at the griffin that had fainted, and ordered others, "Kill this monster." After giving the order, King Uther grabbed Kai's hand and planned to take his adopted son back to the palace. "Wait! Don't kill it, I caught it with great difficulty." Kai hurriedly stopped the soldier's actions. "My king, this is my prey, I have the right to deal with it." Hearing Kai's cry, almost everyone looked at the warrior in amazement. The warrior here is not only because Kai dared to fight the griffin, but also because he dared to openly oppose King Uther's order. In Camelot, people who dare to do this are rarer than warriors who dare to fight the griffin. But surprisingly, King Uther did not order the punishment of the person who dared to oppose him as usual, but asked with a puzzled look, "This is a monster. What do you want it to do?" "It's too dangerous, Kai. The best way to deal with such monsters is to kill them." King Uther's attitude surprised everyone, including Merlin. This was not the King Uther they had in mind. Especially Merlin, as a wizard, he actually disliked and even hated King Uther's attitude towards magic. Those who were executed because of magic were all as kind in Merlin's eyes. Many of them did not do evil, but were sent to the guillotine by King Uther. King Uther, who had always been tough and cold, became rare and reasonable when facing Kai. In Merlin's impression, even Arthur could not disobey King Uther's orders, let alone oppose King Uther's orders in public. "I need a mount. My horse was eaten by this guy. This guy made me walk for 5 days and 5 nights, and," Kai pointed to the armor on his body. "Except for this thing, I feel like nothing can carry me." King Uther only had the mind to take a closer look at the armor on Kai at this time. This set of armor is very gorgeous, with exquisite patterns and some runes he didn't recognize everywhere on it. King Uther didn't think that any craftsman in the British Isles could forge this kind of carving and forging technology. Of course, the thickness of the armor also made King Uther very concerned. This thickness is much thicker than ordinary knight armor. So King Uther also believed Kai's words. This thing is at least 300 or 400 pounds, and ordinary horses can't carry a knight wearing this armor. Kai, the prototype, is one of King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur's brother and important retainer. Kai's father is King Arthur's adoptive father and one of the oldest characters in Arthurian legend. In the legend of King Arthur and the Sword in the Stone, Kai forgot to bring his sword during the duel, so he asked Arthur to go to the inn to get the sword for him. As a result, the inn was closed, so Arthur pulled out the sword from the stone. Chapter 5 Banquet. King Uther did not reject this unreasonable request outright as usual. He was thinking about what the consequences would be if he agreed to Kai's request. Facing this child who had been away from home for a full 10 years, King Uther did not want to reject the child's first request after returning emotionally. But King Uther was a king, and as a king, he could not be emotional in many cases. The magic ban was a decree that King Uther had insisted on for more than 10 years, and it was also the most persistent measure in his life. He could not and did not want to break this ban. It was easy to agree to Kai's request, but what about after that? Does the griffin belong to the category of magic ban? There is no doubt that it is. The griffin is an unnatural creature, it is a magical creature. Owning and taming a griffin is undoubtedly a violation of the ban. If King Uther so blatantly shielded Kai from adopting the griffin, it would be equivalent to King Uther breaking his own ban with his own hands. If this really happened, then the majesty of the law would become useless and eventually become a dead letter. This is not what King Uther wants. He knows very well the horror of magic. He will never allow the disaster caused by magic to befall his kingdom again. Therefore, even if it is the request of his favorite child, King Uther can only refuse. No. The law is law. King Uther emphasized the last word. He knew that his K was a sensible child, and he could understand his responsibility as a king. Just as he said, the law is law. If the law can be trampled on at will, then it is better not to establish this law. After all, if the ruler openly violates the law when there is a law, then the foundation of the king's rule will be weakened. Law is order, and order is the foundation of rule. As a qualified king, King Uther understands this very well. Kay looked at King Uther's firm eyes and finally had no choice but to compromise. There is no way. King Uther is Kay's family. Kay cherishes his family very much in this life and the last life. He can't really go against his family for a beast. Okay, but he is my prey and I must kill him, Kay said solemnly. After all, this is a lot of experience points, and Kai can't waste it. Hearing Kai compromise, King Uther felt sincerely relieved. Kai is still the same Kai, always so sensible. So King Uther certainly would not refuse such a reasonable request, although he himself felt it was unnecessary. The honor of defeating the griffin already belongs to Kai, and no one can deny this. As for the matter of finishing off the griffin, it is really not worth mentioning, and it is still bleeding. But since Kai insisted, King Uther did not stop him. Soon, Kai used the battle axe in his hand to chop off the griffin's head one by one, like chopping wood. During this period, the griffin woke up once, but was immediately hit on the forehead by Kai's battle axe and fainted again. After that, it never woke up again. After about 10 minutes of hard work, the griffin's head was finally chopped off. Although the incision was very bad and affected the beauty a little, no one cared about it now. Everyone cheered for the warrior who killed the griffin. In the evening, a grand banquet was being held in the banquet hall of the palace. However, unlike the usual welcome banquet, there was no cheerful music, no rude toasts from the knights, and even no one was at the long table farther away. But the atmosphere in the banquet hall was great, not deserted at all. Everyone gathered at the long table near the throne, and even the servants who served in the banquet hall unconsciously left their jobs and tried their best to get together in that circle. It was a blizzard that day. In broad daylight, you couldn't see anything 5 meters away. It was so cold that your nose would freeze off. Those evil frost giants also took this opportunity to attack the city of Asgard. Each of those terrible guys was 13 feet tall and covered with thick ice armor. Ordinary weapons couldn't hurt them at all. Among all the people, Sir Kay was telling his adventures in a vivid way. In this era, the area of human activity was very small. Just take the Celtic countries on the British Isles as an example. The Celts mainly lived in the southern part of England near Ireland in the future, and the areas further north were all primeval forests. There are countless ferocious beasts and some supernatural creatures in these primeval forests that threaten people's safety at all times, so the world in people's eyes at this time will never exceed 50 kilometers, or even smaller. At least in this hall, only a few knights have a little more knowledge, but it is limited to the Celtic countries. They know nothing about places farther away. Kai is different. He spent 10 years starting from Camelot and heading east. He first arrived in Norway, which is not the home of the Vikings yet. There lived a group of highly civilized people who called themselves Asgardians. Kai lived in Asgard for almost a year, and then crossed the European plains, which were still a primitive and uncivilized area, and came to the warm Mediterranean region. Here, Kai encountered a civilization called Olympus and saw the civilized world under the leadership of Olympus. There he first learned that there was really a country called Atlantis in the ancient Mediterranean region. You know, in Kai's impression, Atlantis has always been a legend, even a legend that has been proven to be fabricated, and in the legend, Atlantis is in the Atlantic Ocean, not in the Mediterranean Sea. In short, after Kai traveled in the ancient Greek area, he continued to move eastward. After that, he encountered a new civilization in the area called the Mesopotamian Basin in later generations. They called themselves Sumerians. Later, He and these Myshorians encountered an invasion. A group of people from the Western Desert civilization came to the east under the leadership of a superhuman who called himself Sun God Ra and started a protracted war with the Myshorians. This war alone lasted for 3 years. In the end, both sides chose to conclude a treaty after suffering heavy casualties. They agreed that one of them was the ruler of the West and the other was the ruler of the East. After experiencing this prehistoric battle for hegemony, Kai originally planned to continue eastward to return to the eastern land that he had been dreaming about, but reality gave Kai a few big mouths. The road to the east was too dangerous. He and his friend and Maisel had narrowly escaped death several times, but still could not find the way home, and even lost a close friend. Heartbroken, Kai had no choice but to retreat. Chapter 6 Gifts. Are those frost giants real? After telling the story for almost an hour, Kai finally stopped and prepared to drink something to moisten his throat. Kai just stopped, and Morgana, who had been beside Kai, hurriedly handed the poured wine glass to Kai. But while Kai was drinking, Arthur immediately took this opportunity to ask questions. Arthur. Kai just came back and needs to rest. You can't always pester him with questions, but before Kai could speak, Morgana on the side was unhappy. She waited for Kai to come back with great difficulty, but before she could say a few words to her, these guys pulled Kai to ask questions, leaving her no time at all. Although Arthur didn't want to be preached by his sister Princess Morgana, Morgana's words made sense after all. Originally, this was a welcome banquet prepared for Kai, but these people actually pulled Kai to tell stories, which was really rude. Kai didn't care much about it. He hadn't seen Arthur and the others for 10 years, and he also wanted to talk to them. It's okay, I'm not tired. After saying that, he patted Morgana's hand, indicating that it was okay. Morgana blushed a little at Solemn's action, while Arthur on the side didn't pay any attention to Morgana's changes. He only knew that Kai said it was okay, so he could continue to ask. The so-called straight man probably refers to this kind of idiot with no emotional intelligence. Kai saw Arthur's gushing curiosity, and didn't say anything nonsense, but directly ordered the servants on the side to bring his things up. This time, Kai prepared a lot of gifts. Not long after, a group of servants came in with small packages, and even a few servants pushed in a few small cars. Seeing the servants bring in so many things, the people who were drinking during Kai's break were attracted again. Many people know that Kai brought back a lot of things, but no one knows what those things are. People are curious. Knowing that Kai came back from traveling around the world, they are naturally curious about what strange things Kai brought back. Kai asked 2 servants to carry up a huge square package, and then asked Arthur to open it. Arthur immediately rushed over impatiently, and Merlin, who had always been by Arthur's side, was naturally not to be outdone. In the past, Merlin thought that the world of magic was already bizarre enough, and he was a little proud of it, but today he realized how vast the outside world was. What he knew was simply not worth mentioning. So now he especially wanted to know about the outside world. After all, if it were according to his fate, he might never leave Camelot in his lifetime. With Merlin, Arthur naturally didn't need to untie the cloth outside the package himself. And Merlin was happy to help. Merlin untied the package in a few seconds, only to find that there was a square iron box inside the package, which was extremely exquisitely made and was not an ordinary item at first glance. Merlin looked at Arthur, and Arthur nodded, so Merlin opened the lid of the iron box with force. But when he saw clearly what was inside the iron box, poor Merlin was so scared that he threw away the lid of the iron box. Merlin's scream was as powerful as a soprano, and it was so penetrating that it frightened the others. Arthur was much calmer. Although he was also frightened and retreated, he didn't make any embarrassing noises. What is this? Arthur pointed at the inside of the iron box with a pale face and asked in a trembling voice. The performance of these 2 people also aroused the curiosity of others, especially King Uther. He was a little angry at Arthur's cowardice. He had always placed high hopes on Arthur and hoped that he could become a better king than himself, but Arthur's performance was definitely not excellent, and he was not even qualified. So King Uther stood up first and walked to the side of the box to see what was inside. As a result, he was also frightened when he approached, but he was much better than Arthur. At least on the surface, the king could keep a normal face. But his next words still exposed his mood. What the hell is this? It was rare that King Uther even used swear words. Kai was very happy to see their expressions, because when he first saw this thing, he was not much better, and he was laughed at by those Asgardian strongmen for a long time. "This is a frost giant," Kai said with a smile, and then without waiting for others to ask questions, he continued, "Yes, it's the frost giant I was talking about. The head inside is the previous generation of frost giant King Uther. He was killed by me and Asgard King Bjorn together." It turned out that a huge and hideous head was lying quietly in the iron box. The skin of the head was blue-gray, and there were many ice prisms on it. It looked like a lot of ice horns grew on the giant's head. At the same time, white cold air continued to emerge from the iron box, and this cold air made the temperature in the hall drop a lot instantly. Speaking of the origin of this head, Kai also showed a nostalgic expression. The last time Kai returned to Asgard in Northern Europe, Bjorn was not in Asgard. It seemed that he went to another country. Kai did not ask in detail. Anyway, Bjorn had not come back for several months, so Kai did not wait any longer. It was a fierce battle. We fought against the frost giants led by Nair on the walls of Asgard for 10 days and 10 nights, and finally defeated them. Then, I and Bryle led people to chase Nair all the way. After another 10 days and 10 nights, we finally caught up with Nair in the frost giant country of Jotunheim, and finally killed this monster on the ice field of Jotunheim. In that battle, I was almost killed. If it weren't for Bry's son, Bauer, who tried his best to carry me and Bry back from Jotunheim, we might have stayed in that world of ice and snow. Although Kai did not describe the battle in detail, everyone could imagine the fierce battle at that time. It was also because of Kai's explanation that the others put away their initial fear. After all, no matter how scary this head was, it was just a dead thing. Fear comes from the unknown. Now that the origin is known, the fear will naturally be reduced a lot. Only Merlin is different from others. His fear is even deeper. Because he can feel a strong magic fluctuation from the head, which means that the owner of this head must have had extremely strong magic abilities when he was alive. It was the first time that Merlin had seen such a powerful magical creature, and such a powerful magical creature was killed by Kai. He felt that if he was exposed, he would die more easily. When King Uther heard the origin of the head, he was relieved. "Well done, Kai. But why did you keep this head?" The Celts are one of the most civilized nations in the world today. They don't have the habit of keeping the heads of their enemies. That is a tradition of barbarians. Hearing King Uther's question, Kai grinned and said, "Cool down." Chapter 7 Gift. The biggest reason why Kai kept the head of the Frost Giant King was to use it as a refrigerator. Although putting food next to a hideous head is a test of people's tolerance, after getting used to it, it feels okay, even a bit dark gothic. If you are interested in this style, you can even sleep with the head of the Frost Giant King in your arms and use it as an air conditioner. Kai's explanation made everyone shudder, but some people with big hearts thought it was a good idea. After all, everyone knows that low temperature is more conducive to the preservation of food. "Father, I think we can put this thing in our storage room." Arthur's big heart was reflected at this time. After the initial fear, the boy immediately took out the head of the frost giant with great interest and suggested to his father. King Uther looked at his son, who was always short of heart, with a sullen face, gritted his teeth and said, "Don't even think about it." Kai happily watched the interaction between Arthur and his son. After so many years away, he actually missed the atmosphere of home. Although it was exciting outside, it always lacked such warmth. "Okay, Arthur, put that thing down. I was just joking. It's my trophy and a testimony to my friendship with King Buri. I can't really let you put it in the kitchen." Kai took the head from Arthur and put it in the box again, which ended the struggle between the father and son. Then Kai took out several boxes from a pile of packages. He took out a long box and handed it to Arthur. "This is your gift." Kai is Arthur's brother. He has watched Arthur grow up since he was a child, so Arthur never knew what politeness was when facing Kai. He hurriedly opened the long box and took out the things inside. It was a long sword, about 1.4 meters long, the hilt was lengthened, and the blade was about 9 centimeters. It was not much different from an ordinary knight's long sword, but unlike ordinary steel-made long swords, this sword was dark gold in color, simple and elegant in shape, and the hilt was shaped like 2 giant dragons guarding the blade, which was very consistent with Arthur's identity. King Arthur's family emblem is a red dragon. Arthur received the most rigorous knight education since he was a child, and his understanding of weapons even exceeded his own clothes. So when he got the sword, Arthur knew that it was definitely a sharp weapon. "This is a long sword that I asked a dwarf forging master in Asgard to make for you. It is made of the hardest and most mysterious metal under the northern ice field. I almost spent all my savings for it. So use it well, Arthur. In fact, the forging of this sword is more difficult than Kai said. The main material of this sword is called fine gold. When Kai heard this name for the first time, he almost thought that the dwarf was also a time traveler like himself. After all, although Kai didn't read novels much in his previous life, he also read a few Western fantasy novels when he was in school, and knew that fine gold was completely fabricated and a fantasy metal. But as he understood it, Kai realized that he had misunderstood. Although they are both called fine gold, this rare metal is completely different from the fine gold that Kai had seen in novels in his previous life. This magical metal called fine gold is very light, not even a quarter of the weight of iron of the same volume, which is completely different from the fine gold in the novel. But its hardness and cutting ability are exactly the same as described in the novel. It is even more rare. If Kai had not been kind to the dwarves, the greedy dwarves would not have taken this thing out at all. But even so, Arthur's sword is not made entirely of fine gold, it is mixed with some other metals. However, the forging skills of the Nordic dwarves completely surpassed this era, and their alloy technology was very strong, which led to the high quality of this long sword, which did not disgrace the fine gold. Originally, the dwarves and King Buri were going to enchant this sword, but Kai considered King Uther's attitude towards magic and finally rejected their kindness. Although this long sword is very sharp and hard, it has no magical effect. Arthur played with the long sword given to him by Kai and liked it very much. He waved it twice and found that the center of gravity and structure of this sword were perfect, without any jerky, and extremely labor-saving. Holding it in his hand, he liked it more and more. As a result, the front end of the sword accidentally swept the wine pot and wine glass next to him. At that time, the Celts did not have high-end things like porcelain. They used pottery more, and the palace used metal products. For example, King Uther's favorite wine glass was made of pure gold. But after Arthur's sword touched the wine pot and wine glass, the sword passed through the wine pot and wine glass without any hindrance, as if the sword had not touched anything at all. After about 5 seconds, the wine pots and wine glasses slowly split into 2 halves. No, it should be split into 2 halves. The upper part of the cut wine pots and wine glasses slid down silently, spilling the wine inside all over the floor. The cut was even smoother without a trace of burrs. Everyone took a breath of cold air. They had never thought that there would be such a sharp weapon. Then all the men present looked at the long sword in Arthur's hand enthusiastically. After all, they were all knights, and there was no knight who didn't love magic weapons. In their eyes, the longsword in Arthur's hand was comparable to the artifact in Celtic mythology. Arthur also took a breath of cold air. This thing was really too sharp. For a moment, Arthur was afraid that this long sword would cut himself. Kai was not surprised by this. He patted Arthur on the shoulder and said, "You must make good use of this weapon in the future. Does this sword have a name?" Arthur came back to his senses and asked eagerly. "Excalibur, his name, the sword of the oath of victory," Kai said with a bit of evil taste, and then ignored Arthur. Instead, he turned his eyes to King Uther. King Uther also had expectations at this time. He was not interested in Kai's gift at first, and he even disagreed with Kai's 10-year trip around the world. He thought that was too ambitious. A real man should take his own responsibilities instead of pursuing those illusory things. But the gift Kai gave to Arthur made him feel surprised. Like all knights, no, it should be like all men, King Uther also had no resistance to this kind of magic weapon. Unfortunately, Kai did not have the habit of giving gifts repeatedly. Moreover, Kai had no place to find more of such a good thing as refined gold. This time, Kai gave King Uther a crown. A crown that was extremely gorgeous, and more importantly, this crown was made entirely of coral and pearls. This crown is called the Fisherman's Crown. It was given to me by the king of the Fisherman's Kingdom in Atlantis when I was traveling in Atlantis. Although the name is not very nice, this crown is the most precious treasure of the Fisherman's Kingdom. It is a crown formed naturally by coral and has not been polished. The Atlanteans just put a few golden pearls on it. After hearing Kai's explanation, King Uther's face immediately became extremely satisfied. In fact, when Kai took out the crown, he was already very satisfied. Although it is not a magic weapon, the crown made of coral is enough to surprise him. The Celtic people's navigation technology was not very good, otherwise they would not have only traveled around England. This also led to the fact that corals and pearls were extremely rare in the Celtic countries, and they were more rare and precious treasures than gold and gems. 4 other kings. If the crown could be inlaid with some broken corals, it would be enough to satisfy them. If it was inlaid with a pearl, it would attract the envy of all kings. And what about the crown that Kai gave him? It was made of the most beautiful red coral, and it was naturally formed. The slightly golden pearls on it were even more priceless. King Uther even suspected that if he was willing to sell this crown, there would probably be a king willing to exchange his own royal city for it. With this crown, King Uther could freely announce to everyone the wealth and power of Camelot. This temptation was absolutely irresistible for a king. Finally, Kai turned his eyes to Morgana, who was standing aside. Morgana had been watching Kai there with a proud smile from the beginning, and everyone was amazed. Morgana didn't come to her senses until Kai looked at her, and her face was immediately covered with blushes. Kai stepped forward, took Morgana's hand, and patted the girl on the head. "And Morgana, how could I forget my most lovely sister?" Kai took Morgana's hand and came to a pile of boxes. Pointing at these boxes, he said, "These are all yours, my lovely Princess Morgana." Then the servants opened the boxes quickly with excitement. After the previous 2 gifts, no one would think that the gift that Sir Kai gave to Princess Morgana would be ordinary. As a result, it was amazing when it was opened. Everyone was blinded by the things inside. Exotic gold jewelry, jewels, artworks, and mysterious silk. But the most eye-catching among them was a set of women's armor and a pair of slightly shorter knight swords. All of these things exuded the light of wealth, and even the knowledgeable King Uther thought he had come to his own treasury. Morgana was suddenly a little at a loss when she saw these things. Of course she liked the gifts Kai gave her, but these gifts were too expensive. So expensive that she didn't know how to deal with it. King Uther was a frugal king. Although he cared about his reputation, he was not extravagant in private. As King Uther's adopted daughter, Morgana never lacked anything, but she had never seen so much wealth. "Why? My lovely Miss Morgana, are you going to reject your Kai?" "That's too sad," Kai said pretentiously. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: Past and Present Life. Finally, with the encouragement of King Uther, Morgana accepted Kay's gift, but she couldn't stand the eyes of others and shyly hid back in her room. Seeing Morgana's little daughter's attitude, King Uther also comforted and smiled with satisfaction. Morgana likes Kay, which almost everyone with a little experience knows. And now Kay gave Morgana so many valuable gifts in front of so many people. What does it mean? Everyone knows in their hearts. King Uther is even more happy to see it happen. Although Morgana said to the outside world that she was his adopted daughter, in fact, Morgana was his biological daughter. Only 3 people in the whole kingdom knew this. One was himself, the other was the royal pharmacist Gaius, and finally it was Kay. This involved a series of bloody stories, and King Uther didn't want others to know. Gaius knew because he was King Uther's best friend. And Kay knew the secret because of an accident. So for King Uther, he always felt guilty about Morgana. He hoped that Morgana could live a good life. Marrying Kai is undoubtedly the best choice. Although Kai is a little naive, King Uther has to admit that Kai is the best young man he has ever seen in his life. Moreover, Kai knows everything about him. Kai grew up beside him since he was a child, and the time Kai has spent with him since he was a child has exceeded that of Kai's own father. King Uther knows Kai, and he knows that Kai can definitely bring happiness to Morgana. The dinner ended with amazement and cheers. This day may leave a strong and colorful mark in the history of Camelot. What happened today will definitely be repeated and repeated by everyone with relish. However, although all the guests were very happy, Kai was not in a good mood. He stood alone on the high-rise terrace of the royal palace, quietly watching the lights of the royal city gradually go out. Suddenly, there was an unprecedented loss. Kai has a secret that no one knows. He is a time traveler. His original name is no longer important, especially after his way to go home is completely cut off. Kai's original name is really not important at all in this world. In his previous life, he was a policeman and a soldier. When he was in the army, although his performance was not the best, he was definitely an excellent soldier of the people. Later, due to some reasons, he was forced to retire and become a criminal policeman in his hometown. His experience as a scout made his police career quite successful. Although he had never caught any murderers, high IQ criminals and other ruthless characters, after all, his city was only a third-tier city, and there were not so many exciting experiences. But he had successfully solved many cases and arrested many criminal suspects. He believed that he was worthy of the police badge on his head. There was nothing to say about his experience of crossing, except that he died during a surprise arrest. The only thing he was thankful for was that he was the only one who died in that pursuit. The other colleagues were fine. Although he was not an orphan in his previous life, his parents had long passed away, and he had no wife or children. Although he had had several girlfriends, most of them broke up because of work reasons. A typical lonely person, there is nothing to miss if he dies. The other colleagues are different. They are either not very old or have children. And he was in command that time. He didn't want his mistakes to cause others to pay the price. In short, he traveled through time after waking up, not in a different body, but as soon as he woke up, he became a baby. After that, he grew up in Camelot. His biological parents loved him very much, and they kept him in Camelot not because of some bloody plot. It was completely based on the rules of the nobility. Kai is the third son, the youngest in the family, and has no inheritance rights. The family's property does not have the spare capacity to support 3 children. The support here does not mean that they can't afford it. His family has been aristocrats for generations, so he will never lack a bite of food. The so-called support here is a matter after adulthood. Kai's eldest brother is the eldest son and the most legitimate heir. The family's territory belongs to him. His second brother is also much older than Kai. Although he has no inheritance rights, his parents have already helped him think of a way out. He will inherit a small piece of territory from his mother's dowry, and the family will also divide a small part of the territory so that he can become a territory knight and continue to be loyal to the family. But there are some problems when it comes to Kai. Although Kai's family is old, it is not a great noble family. The family cannot allow the territory to continue to disperse, which will threaten the existence of the family. This is a difficult problem that us small nobles in this era need to face. With more children, they must make some choices. It is impossible to treat them all equally, which is irresponsible to the family. After all, a knight's title is not so easy to get. Knights must be nobles, there is nothing to say about this. Secondly, they must be property owners. In this era, people believe in property owners more. Those propertyless knights give people the impression of being disloyal, incompetent, and even rogue. In short, wandering knight is not a good title. And property is not just a room and a few acres of land. That is a real territory. This territory is either granted by the king or inherited by the family. There is no third choice. But the king's grant is too difficult. After all, it is difficult for a civilian or a propertyless knight to gain the trust and appreciation of the king. This is a dead end. So family inheritance has become the mainstream. So Kai's future has become a problem. Fortunately, Kai's father had a way. Kai's father, Sir Ector, was a close friend of King Uther, who grew up naked. In short, because of his good relationship with the king, Sir Ector followed the king's path and sent his third son to the king to become a royal attendant. This is also the best way for nobles to find opportunities for children in the family who have no inheritance rights. Of course, generally speaking, they must be very close to the royal family. Also because of his father, Kai grew up in the palace since he was a child. King Uther also loved Kai and treated him as his own child. He did not treat Kai like other attendants, but treated Kai as his own child. In the end, he even announced that Kai would become his adopted son. Although there was a reason why the first queen liked Kai, King Uther, who was notoriously old-fashioned and stubborn, could make such a decision, absolutely out of sincerity. In this era, adopted sons cannot be recognized casually. Legally, adopted sons also have inheritance rights. Although the inheritance rights are relatively late, they are also potential heirs to the king, especially when King Uther did not have biological children at that time. At that time, almost everyone was against King Uther's decision, even Kai's biological father, Sir Ector. If King Uther never had a child, or if King Uther suddenly died on the battlefield, the royal family would have to change bloodlines, which was too far-reaching. What's more, some people in Camelot at that time already knew that the queen was no longer fertile. This simply made Kai the heir directly. In those years, the queen and King Uther were under tremendous pressure, until Arthur was born, which calmed everything down. Kai grew up safely in Camelot. After all, he was a time traveler. The knowledge, Experience and golden fingers brought by his previous life made Kai perform extremely well, which made King Uther very proud and thought that it was an extremely correct decision for him to adopt Kai as his adopted son. And Kai did not disappoint King Uther. He just came of age and defeated the knights of various countries in the kingdom's knight competition and became the champion knight. King Uther was not stingy either. When Kai became the champion knight at the age of 18, he directly made Kai a knight. However, Kai then made a decision that made King Uther extremely angry. He decided to hand over the territory to the king and then started traveling around the world alone. This made everyone at the time confused. They couldn't figure out why Kai made such an unwise decision. Only Kai himself knew that he wanted to go home. Chapter 9 Goldfinger and Return Home. Chinese people believe that when a fox dies, it returns to its homeland. Kai was born in a more traditional family in his previous life. He attaches great importance to this, just like he would go back to his hometown every year during the spring festival, even if he had no relatives in his hometown, but if he didn't do so, he would always feel that something was missing. It was the same after coming to this world. He was an adult with a complete worldview, so even if his parents and relatives in this life were very good to Kai, Kai was not a real child after all, and he was always a little alienated from them. He was afraid that if he really accepted his relatives in this life, he would forget his relatives and friends in another world. Although he was not sure whether this would really happen, he always had such a thorn in his heart. Especially when Kai's golden finger awakened, Kai's desire to go home became stronger and stronger. Speaking of the golden finger, Kai didn't know where it came from. Anyway, when he followed King Uther to hunt for the first time at the age of 10, his golden finger awakened after he killed a half-grown wild boar independently. Kai's ability is very special, even a little evil. At the beginning, Kai was even very repulsive to it. Kai's ability is very simple, which is to gain experience by killing people. Kai is not sure if his description is accurate. But after he killed the wild boar, he could feel a surge of energy flowing from the wild boar into his body. This energy made Kai's strength stronger, his body more sensitive, his mind clearer, his thinking more flexible, and his memory stronger. At the same time, there were many attribute panels in his mind that would be seen in online games. The panel is very simple, with only a few lines of text. There are 3 attributes: strength, agility, and spirit. And an energy bar. The 3 attributes are easy to understand. Basically, anyone who has played a little online game or even read a little similar novel can understand them. What really makes Kai feel daunted is the energy bar. Every time Kai kills a creature, the energy bar will grow a little. When the energy bar is full, Kai will get a point, which can be added to the 3 attributes. Moreover, Kai's ability can take away different amounts of energy for different objects. Generally speaking, the rules it follows are related to 2 things. One is the intelligence of the object Kai kills. The higher the intelligence, the more energy Kai can plunder. So humans become one of Kai's best prey. The second is strength. Whether it is an animal, a monster or a human, the stronger the strength, the more energy it can plunder. At the same time, this ability will also plunder the ability of the killed object. However, this depends on the probability, a bit like killing monsters to get equipment and skill books. Generally speaking, the explosion rate is very low, and many abilities are useless to Kai, or even cannot be learned. Kai can choose some of these abilities as his own, and use energy points to strengthen these abilities. This golden finger gave Kai a very bad feeling at first, because all these abilities encouraged Kai to kill. But soon Kai adjusted his mentality. He used to be a soldier, and later he has been a policeman. His psychological quality is absolutely strong. He soon figured it out. To put it bluntly, this golden finger is actually a weapon. Weapons are never scary. They are neither good nor evil. The only scary thing is always the person who uses the weapon. Kai's experience in his previous life gave him enough confidence to use this weapon reasonably. After adjusting his mentality, Kai began to look at his abilities more peacefully, and then he saw the hope of returning home from this ability. With his golden finger, it means that he has the capital to go home. So he had planned to go home since he was 13 years old. First of all, magic and witchcraft were his first choice. After all, no matter how you look at it, his crossing was definitely a supernatural event, so using supernatural power to solve it was undoubtedly the best way. Unfortunately, King Uther began to crack down on witchcraft and magic since Arthur was born, causing witchcraft and magic to disappear in Camelot. Even if Kai wanted to learn, there was no place to learn. So Kai had to change his plan and he had to leave Camelot. He trained hard and strengthened his strength to prepare for his departure from Camelot. Finally, at the age of 18, he defeated knights from various countries in the knights competition and became the champion knight. He proved his ability, and then at the enfeoffment ceremony, he took the opportunity to ask for a trip. Although King Uther was reluctant to let Kai go and forced Kai to stay at home, Kai was really like King Uther in some ways. At least they were just as stubborn. Finally, one night, Kai, who was confined by King Uther, left a letter and ran away. In the letter he left behind, Kai did not say that he wanted to go home, but that he wanted to travel around the world, and left a 10-year deadline as a consolation. Kai thought that 10 years should be enough for him to find the answer. If he could go back, then this 10-year agreement would only be a consolation, so that King Uther and the others would have time to accept the fact that he would never come back. If he could not go back. In short, 10 years would definitely be enough. Then it was Kai's 10-year trip around the world. In these 10 years, Kai traveled all over the world. This is not very accurate. Kai's footprints have not gone that far. He has only traveled in Europe, Asia Minor and North Africa in these 10 years. But in these places, Kai met many people and many things, many of which were bizarre. It was also these experiences that caused Kai to suffer a very serious blow. He was sure that the world he was in now was not the same as the original world. For example, in Northern Europe, he met Asgardians. At first, Kai did not care, until he wandered around Asia Minor and returned to Asgard. Kai probably guessed who he met. Or maybe it's God. Kai wasn't very familiar with Norse mythology before, but he had at least seen Marvel's Thor movie. He also knew that frost giants, fire giants, dwarves, and Asgard were elements of Norse mythology. Combining his experience in Asia Minor, it's not hard to guess. Although he didn't meet Odin, let alone Thor, the god of thunder, when many things are combined, it can be basically determined that Asgard is the prototype of Norse mythology. Later, he thought about it and figured it out. It was normal that he didn't meet Odin and Thor, because although he was not sure when he was in the era, it should be BC. Kai hadn't found the Jewish people in the Middle East. That is to say, it was still a long time before the birth of Jesus. So there was nothing wrong with BC. Thinking about it this way, it was normal that Odin was not born during this period. By the way, speaking of this, there is another interesting story. When Kai returned to Northern Europe from Asia Minor this time, he went to visit his friend, King Buri of Asgard. At that time, Buri was not there, and it was Buri's son Beor who received him. At that time, Kai accidentally let it slip and asked if there was a child named Odin in Asgard. Beor was very honest and really helped Kai look around, but found that there was no child named Odin. Beor was curious about why Kai wanted to find a child named Odin. Kai could only make up a story and said that he heard in a place that a child named Odin would do great things in the future. Beor really believed this statement, so he decided to name his first child Odin. So the name of the future king of the gods was determined. But at that time, Kai was already numb, so he was not very excited. Could he tell Beor that he not only met a legendary Olympian gods in the east, but also accidentally cuckolded Zeus? In the more distant Sumerian region, he met a legendary Gilgamesh, and fought a battle with the ancient Egyptian gods together with his first hero king of mankind? In short, it was because of these weird and bizarre experiences that Kai completely understood that this world was completely different from his original world. At least in his world, the people he met were all mythological figures. Before, when Kai traveled through time and met King Uther and King Arthur, it could be said that it was a historical misunderstanding. After all, in the world of his previous life, whether Arthur existed or not was questionable, and it couldn't be absent. Maybe he really existed? But when those mythological figures stood in front of Kai alive, the conclusion was easy to draw. Before, Kai had always thought that he only needed to travel through time to return to the future, but now it seems that he not only has to travel through time, but also the whole world. However, Kai still did not give up. After finishing his journey in Asia Minor, he decided to continue to the east. After all, no matter what, it is the closest place to home. But the next blow is even greater. Kai, Gilgamesh, Enkidu and others set out for the east together. As a result, only Kai and Gilgamesh came back, and Enkidu and a group of followers and warriors all fell. On the road to the east, there are countless monsters and horrific disasters caused by countless mysterious forces. Kai and Gilgamesh were lucky to come back alive. The way to go home is completely cut off. Thinking about these things, Kai drank a pot of wine without realizing it. Just when Kai was about to turn around to get another pot of wine, a cloak was draped over Kai. It turned out to be Morgana, who had not slept all the time. She was very happy tonight, really very happy, so excited that she couldn't sleep. Then she accidentally found Kai drinking on the terrace. Seeing that he was still drinking outside so late, Morgana was afraid that he would catch a cold, so she found a cloak for Kai to put on. Kai had been immersed in his own world just now, and didn't notice Morgana's arrival at all. It's so late, don't drink. It's not good for your health. Although Kai's actions tonight almost made the relationship between the two clear, Morgana was still a little shy at this moment. Kai looked at the beautiful Morgana. And suddenly a sense of absurdity surged in his heart. In his previous life, he was just a small policeman, with little money, and his work was busy and dangerous. It was really difficult for good girls to like him. Now that there is such a beautiful girl who loves him deeply, why should he be hypocritical? Thinking of this, Kai smiled and buried his longing for his hometown in the deepest part. Since he can't go back, he should live a good life here. Maybe. Chapter 10, Downward. You're too slow. Faster. More resolute. Did you have breakfast? Use more force. In the morning, after breakfast, at the night's training ground, Kai stood on the field again after 10 years to educate his younger brother Arthur. Just like 10 years ago, the younger brother is always the younger brother, and the grown-up Arthur still has no power to fight back in front of Kai. After the competition began, the wooden sword in his hand could not touch Kai at all. Even though Kai was wearing armor, his flexible body and footwork still made Arthur look like a big bear that couldn't catch a bee. He could only clumsily swing the long sword in his hand, and then watch Kai dodge lightly, and then slap himself hard with the wooden sword in his hand. Although Kai's attacks were all reserved, and the hits on the body would only hurt at most, and would not really cause any harm, but these repeated hits still caused tons of damage to Arthur's heart. Kai was Arthur's enlightenment teacher, and Arthur's swordsmanship was taught by Kai. At that time, Arthur was still young and couldn't beat Kai, so it was normal for him to be beaten by Kai all day long. But 10 years later, Arthur originally thought that the gap between him and Kai would be narrow no matter what, and Arthur even imagined that he could surpass Kai. After all, Arthur's talent is obvious to everyone. Over the years, Arthur can almost be said to be invincible in the nights, which makes Arthur a little arrogant. As a result, our young Arthur was beaten by reality. Just like 10 years ago, he still had no power to fight back. And this was when Kai was not serious at all. Footsteps. Footsteps. I have always told you that your footsteps must be steady. Your footsteps can be slow, but they must be steady. If you can't even stand steadily in a battle, how can you fight others? After Kai dodged Arthur's attack again, he gently swung the wooden sword in his hand and hit Arthur's knee. As a result, Arthur couldn't stand steadily and staggered forward. This made Kai very dissatisfied. Before Kai joined the army in his previous life, he graduated from a martial arts school. He could barely be considered a martial artist and had also worshipped a master. Although the master was not a famous master, he was also a disciple of Yunjin Bian's Bajikwan. Due to his limited talent, he could only make a living in the martial arts school. However, he was born in a famous and upright family, so the basic requirements were very high. In addition, Kai was a formal apprentice, and the master was not polite. He was very strict since he was a child. In his previous life, Kai didn't think it was a big deal when he was studying, because neither his master nor his family allowed him to fight or make trouble, which meant that his body was a little stronger than ordinary people. It was not until he became a soldier that he realized how important those basics were. In the army, Kai relied on his solid foundation to perform very well in daily training. The progress of training was much faster than that of soldiers of the same year. It was also because of this that he was selected to become a scout. Among all the basics, the lower body is the most important. An unstable lower body will make the footsteps empty. The whole person looks weak and like floating around, and he will be knocked down with a sweep. Most of the logic of using strength in martial arts starts from the lower body. And the waist is the main force. For example, stand still, twist the waist, turn the hips, send a punch, and the force comes out like this. If the lower body is not stable, the leverage is insufficient, the punching force is extremely weak, and the power cannot be exerted at all. If the lower body is stable, the stability of the person will be high, and the body will be able to remain stable when turning and turning, and the counterattack will be faster and more powerful. Kai's master Chang once told Kai that when dealing with martial artists, look at the legs first. See if he walks with strength and stability. If the footsteps are weak, such a person is definitely a show-off. Although the fight looks good, the difference will be immediately apparent when the fight starts. Kai has always remembered this truth in his life, so he never missed the horse stance and standing. As his younger brother, Kai naturally taught Arthur this way. As a result, after not seeing him for 10 years, Arthur actually forgot all his teachings. This is also a common problem of Celtic knights. They habitually exercise strength first and then learn swordsmanship. They do not have a specific training method for the lower body. At most, they squat while holding a stone pillar. And to be honest, Kai's set of things was really stupid in the eyes of others, and the horse stance was really not elegant. But Kai never thought that his always obedient brother would actually forget his instructions. This made Kai very upset. Arthur is Arthur. He is destined to be the king. In this era, the king must have power, because this era is not safe, like the griffin that day. Is there only one griffin in the whole world? What a joke. There are many monsters like this outside the human activity area. In this dangerous era, only strength can guarantee people's survival. Again, Arthur is Arthur. The title of King Arthur is not a joke. Even if Kai knew little about foreign things in his previous life, he knew some stories about the Night King. After so many ancient mythological figures appeared in front of him, Kai is now unsure whether Arthur was given this name by coincidence. After all, even Zeus, Gilgamesh, and Odin have appeared. Why can't there be another King Arthur? Get up, Kai decided to teach Arthur a profound lesson, to let him know the price of laziness. Arthur is King Arthur. If he is really so weak, how can he change the ending in the legend? It would be fine if Kai didn't know Arthur, but now that Arthur has become his younger brother, he can't let Arthur accept the terrible ending. Although Kai's knowledge of the legend of King Arthur is limited to that Arthur is very cool, then he was cheated on, then he was betrayed, and then he died. He doesn't know much about the rest, and he doesn't even know how Arthur ended up. After all, Kai in his previous life didn't have any special hobbies in this area. He was born in a typical traditional Chinese family. Apart from occasionally listening to foreign songs and watching a few blockbusters, he rarely took the initiative to learn about foreign culture. But Kai has a very simple view, that is, as long as Arthur is stronger than the legend, then he will definitely be able to change his fate. Arthur is not a child after all, and it is impossible for him to cry after falling down. He stood up quickly. He raised the sword again. The education he received did not allow him to give up easily. Seeing Arthur's resolute look, Kai felt a little comforted. You should think like this, otherwise I will doubt what you have been doing for the past 10 years. After saying that, Kai picked up another wooden sword from the shelf beside him. I forgot to mention that Kai is a dual blade player. He doesn't like the sword and shield style that knights like most. Kai made a sword flower with his right hand, held the wooden sword in his right hand, and pointed the wooden sword at Arthur with his left hand. Begin, with Kai's loud shout. Kai slid towards Arthur with both legs, and slashed the wooden sword in his right hand directly at Arthur's head. Chapter 11 Competition. Although it has been 10 years, Arthur is still very familiar with Kai's offensive habits. Kai likes to strike first, and his first attack is often powerful and heavy, which disrupts the enemy's rhythm in the first step. Then Kai's continuous attacks tear through the enemy's defense and defeat the enemy with lightning strikes. So for Kai's first attack, Arthur has been very alert. He plans to catch Kai's first attack first, unload the force of the attack, and then rush into Kai's front with a shield, squeezing Kai's space and not giving Kai a chance to attack continuously. Then use the shield to hide and disrupt Kai's rhythm, and then use swordsmanship to resolve the battle. The logic is clear and there is nothing wrong with it. The only problem is whether he can catch Kai's first attack. In a flash, Arthur caught Kai's wooden sword. But before Arthur could do anything, Kai twisted his wrist and his wooden sword caught Arthur's wooden sword. Then, Arthur's long sword was pulled aside. This clever force also pulled Arthur's body aside. Arthur's lower body was not stable, and Kai's change of moves was faster than Arthur's reaction speed, so Arthur staggered. This stagger ruined Arthur's plan. When the balance was broken, people would subconsciously open their hands to maintain balance. People who have been trained would suppress this impulse, but they would still open their doors in an instant and reveal a flaw. And this flaw was enough for Kai to do a lot of things. Kai took advantage of Arthur's unstable body and raised the wooden sword held in his right hand, hitting Arthur's right hand holding the shield. Arthur's hand hurt, and the shield fell off when his right hand loosened. This was because Kai was holding back. With Kai's speed, he could have changed the slash to stab, and then Arthur would be unlucky. After all, although the wooden sword is made of wood, the tip is still pointed. A stab to the vital parts, such as the neck and ribs, can instantly destroy the enemy's combat effectiveness. Of course, that will also cause some collateral damage. After a successful attack, Kai's attack not only did not end but became more fierce. He turned his body, drew a large arc with his left-hand sword, and chopped Arthur from the head again. Kai was still holding back, otherwise the target of this slash would not be Arthur's chest wearing armor, but Arthur's head without a helmet. Arthur's chest was chopped by Kai, and his whole body retreated uncontrollably. Kai took advantage of the situation and did not let him go. He was like a waltz dancer, taking elegant steps, and the whole person spun around, and the two swords kept slashing at Arthur. Arthur wanted to resist with a sword, but as Kai's rotation became faster and faster, his strength became heavier, and the long sword in his hand was soon knocked down, and then he was beaten by Kai. Kai did not end the fight quickly. Instead, he kept attacking with his two swords, beating Arthur into a mess. Although he was not injured, it was still painful. In 1 minute, Arthur was hit by Kai about 20 times. When Arthur was about to fall to the ground and could not resist, Kai immediately put away the sword with his right hand, and at the same time, he took a bow step forward with his right foot, twisted his waist, turned his hips, and thrust the sword with his left hand directly at Arthur's chest and abdomen. However, when thrusting, Kai had already reversed the tip of the sword and stabbed Arthur with the handle of the sword. Bang! With a dull sound, Arthur's body was knocked away for about 5 or 6 meters. Then he could no longer get up, and could only lie on the ground weakly and vomited all the breakfast in the morning. Looking at Arthur, Kai shook his head and turned to look at the other members of the knights. Then he said very unhappily, "Arthur told me that it is difficult for him to lose in a fight with the members of the knights now." Kai looked at the confused knights with his eyes seriously, and his eyes gradually became stern. "Now tell me, is he serious? How can he defeat all of you with his level? Or is it that the knights of Camelot are so weak that they can't even beat a child who can't hold a sword?" Kai was not very familiar with these people in the knights. After all, in order to go home, he spent most of his time training, so he had no interest in socializing. Moreover, 10 years have passed, and the knights have changed a lot of people. There are not many familiar people left. But he didn't believe that King Uther would let his knights be so weak. Arthur's swordsmanship was good, but definitely not the real first class. He was just a half-grown child, and his physical functions and combat experience were extremely immature. How could he compare with those experienced knights? If Arthur ranked in the upper ranks of the knights, Kai could barely believe it. After all, Arthur's talent was there, but he was invincible in the entire knights? That was definitely a joke. Then there was only one possibility left, that these knights were giving King Arthur a break. The knights obviously knew what Kai meant, but with Arthur present, they couldn't admit it. They were afraid of hitting Arthur. Of course, many people knew that they were not letting Arthur down and really couldn't beat him, so they had no right to speak. Seeing that these people didn't speak, Kai decided to use the simplest method to find the answer. "Arthur, if you've been lying down enough, go to the side and do horse stance. Don't be like a girl. You are not allowed to rest until I speak." Arthur was taught a lesson by Kai, and although he still felt very bad, he still obediently ran to the side and did horse stance clumsily. Just looking at this posture, you can tell that this kid hasn't done horse stance for a long time. Kai shook his head and then ignored Arthur. Kai knew who Arthur was. After accepting this lesson, he would probably remember this lesson well in a short time. Kai turned his head and looked at the people in the knights, and casually pointed his sword at a knight. "You. Come and fight me, let me see your level." A knight would never retreat in the face of a challenge. For a knight, losing is nothing shameful, but if you don't have the courage to accept a challenge, then you don't need to mix. There is nothing more shameful than a knight being afraid of a challenge. So the knight quickly stood up, and his courage was commendable. But, some things cannot be made up by courage. In less than a minute, the knight was beaten to the ground by Kai. Kai was not as gentle to him as he was to Arthur. Next, in still 1 minute, the knight's arm was dislocated. Next, this one was even worse. He was hit on the head by a sword and fainted. Next, after several rounds, everyone understood what Kai was going to do. He was going to beat up the entire knight group. Such a great thing, naturally, could not be hidden from others. The news spread quickly in the palace, and even King Uther, who was handling government affairs, could not help but come to the high wall outside the training ground to watch Kai's battle. King Uther liked this, and even in order to watch the knights of various countries fight, he did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to hold a knight competition every 3 years, which also made Camelot's knight competition famous in various countries and became a grand event for knights. After all, winning the championship not only gets a huge sum of 2,000 gold coins, but also can make a name for himself among the countries, so of course the knights flock to it. But there are people who are faster than King Uther, that is Morgana and her maid Gwen. Your Highness, is this Sir Kay? Gwen is a black girl. Although she is only 16 years old, she looks very anxious, much older than her actual age. She is not very pretty, at most she is average looking, and very plain. In short, she is just a passerby used to support the beauty of the heroine in the movie. Speaking of black people, I have to say a few more words here. When Kay saw black people for the first time in Camelot, he was really shocked. Is there anything more surprising than seeing black people in England before Christ? But in Camelot and even in the entire Celtic countries, this is very common. Even other people don't think there's anything strange about black people. They don't discriminate against black people at all. It is the kind of true non-discrimination. They think black people are the same as them, nothing special. No one stipulates that black people are not allowed to do this or that. In short, they are not treated specially, just ordinary people like everyone else. The British have always had a big imagination. When I first read The Legend of Merlin, I couldn't understand why there were black people. What's even more ridiculous is that the black man is actually the heroine in this film. Anyone who has seen Merlin will complain about the heroine. Damn. She is a mysterious woman. It's a bit insulting to say that she looks ugly, but she is definitely not beautiful. Really, every time I see the damn woman flirting with two handsome guys, Arthur and Lancelot, I have the urge to bang my head against the wall. It is precisely because of the existence of the damn woman that Morgana is made to look extremely beautiful. Originally, according to my aesthetics, Morgana is not really a top beauty, but because of this black damn woman, every time I see Morgana in the show, it's like seeing a fairy. Especially when the two of them are in the same shot, Morgana's beauty instantly rises by more than 10 percentage points. Chapter 12 Gap. Kai was stunned at the time. Aren't black people in Africa? How did they get to England? By boat? The technology of black people at that time was so advanced that they could cross half of the Atlantic Ocean from Africa to the British Isles. And more importantly, other people didn't think that black people were not Celtic. Their ancestors were the same. Kai sometimes had to sigh that the Celtic bloodline was really magical. Hearing Gwen's admiring question, Morgana was so happy. She said proudly, "That's Kai. He was already a champion knight 10 years ago." Gwen was indeed envious. After all, what Kai did at the banquet last night had spread throughout Camelot today. Although Gwen was just a servant, which girl didn't have such a pick dream? Gwen sometimes dreamed of her own Prince Charming. Then who would be my Prince Charming? Gwen couldn't help asking herself in a certain place in her heart. Thinking of this, Wenger turned his eyes to Merlin and Arthur in a corner of the training ground. Arthur was really depressed now. He was hit twice in a row this morning. First, he fought with Kai and was beaten without any ability to fight back. This made Arthur, who is always very confident in himself, feel very uncomfortable. It's not that he can't accept failure, but failure like this is too much. This reminded him of how he felt when facing Kai 10 years ago. That kind of undisputed strength really made him desperate. That's okay, after all, Kai is special. Even King Uther, who has always been optimistic about Arthur, admitted that Kai is the most talented knight he has ever seen in his life, and Kai can become the strongest knight. This is King Uther's original words. Although he was very unwilling, Arthur would be better off if he lost to the strongest knight. But now Kai told him with more cruel facts that the glory he had achieved before was false. Although Arthur has always been careless, he is not a fool after all. How could he not see now that the members of the Knights had let him go when they competed with him before? The two blows came one after another, making Arthur suddenly feel unreal. He even doubted whether his life was real. These knights could secretly let him go because he was a prince, but what about others? How much of what they said to him was sincere? Merlin on the side didn't think so much. He just wiped Arthur's sweat while watching Kai killing people in the training ground with excitement. As Arthur's personal attendant, Merlin was responsible for all Arthur's miscellaneous items, including but not limited to wearing armor, repairing and maintaining equipment, taking care of horses, preparing horse gear, washing clothes, cooking, etc. Basically, Merlin participated in every aspect of Arthur. So although Merlin was a servant, he was not unfamiliar with the knights. He spent at least half a day here every day. So he really saw a lot of competitions between knights. But like Sir Kai. How to describe it? Beautiful. Yes, it's beautiful. In the past, the knights' competitions were always one after another, which looked powerful and heavy, but there was always a sense of clumsiness, like two puppets fighting, which was not beautiful at all. For this reason, Merlin often slandered King Uther's aesthetics in his heart. He didn't understand what was so beautiful about it. But today, seeing Kai's move, Merlin believed that a person's fight could be so beautiful. Kai's every move was not only full of power, but also full of a sense of fluency that others did not have. Every attack was done in one go, like flowing clouds and water. It was full of unprecedented elegance. The two wooden swords in Kai's hands were more like alive, and there was a rhythm that had never been seen before between fast and slow. During the battle, Kai did not shout loudly like other knights to increase his deterrence. On the contrary, Kai was very quiet, and even his breathing frequency did not change. The most appropriate description is that he was as quiet as a mountain, silent, but extremely majestic. Compared with the rude calls and heavy breathing of other knights, Kai's style is really too high. Hey, Merlin. I asked you to wipe my sweat, not to stuff the towel into my mouth. Arthur was immediately upset when he saw Merlin was so absorbed in watching. After being called out by Arthur, Merlin immediately took back the towel. But Merlin didn't care about Arthur's dissatisfaction. Although Arthur was a little arrogant, liked to order him around, and had a bad temper, he was essentially a good man, and he never treated Merlin as a servant. They were more like friends. Merlin threw the towel aside and asked Arthur with curiosity, "Did you really learn swordsmanship from Sir Kay before?" Arthur didn't react to Merlin's casualness. On the contrary, it was Merlin's reaction that made Arthur willing to be friends with Merlin. He is a prince, and the people in Camelot are either afraid of him or try to please him. Although Arthur is an adult, King Uther's protection of him is so good that his mentality is more like a child who has not grown up. Children need playmates, and Merlin is close to his age, and more importantly, he is sincere to him. Arthur, who lacked companionship since childhood, naturally regarded Merlin as his friend. So he was unwilling to use his status to pressure Merlin. Of course. Why do you ask? After getting the answer, Merlin looked at Arthur carefully, and then said with a look of disgust, "It really doesn't look like." Arthur didn't understand that Merlin was really hitting him. "I want to drink water. Go get me a glass of wine." Merlin shrugged and walked away with a curled mouth. This is how the two big boys get along. Knight Lion, the oldest in the knights, was the last to face Kai. As an old knight, Lion's strength is absolutely outstanding. Even among the countries, he is also a first-class knight, but against Kai, all he can do is to hold on a little longer. Lion was knocked to the ground in a dejected manner, and the wooden sword in his hand was picked up by Kai. He just got up from the ground, and Kai's two wooden swords were crossed and placed on his neck. "I lost," Lion said dejectedly, facing the expressionless Kai. Kai had defeated him 10 years ago, but he didn't expect that he would be defeated even faster 10 years later. He had no power to fight back. Is there anything more depressing than this? What have you done? Leon, Kai didn't care much about this. In fact, it was true. After so many years of experience and fighting, Kai's accumulated soul energy had made him surpass the scope of mortals. His current attributes are Strength 40, Agility 30, Spirit 40. Kai compared it with ordinary people in his previous life. The three attributes were about 2 points each, and the average attribute of trained professionals could reach 3 points. But in this time and space, I don't know what's going on. People's physical fitness is generally very strong. A strong ordinary person can reach 5 points of strength, and 3 points of agility. The spirit is almost the same as in the previous life, hovering between 1 and 2. Only those with the talent of a mage or wizard can have a higher spirit. The strength attribute of a knight can reach up to 10 points, the agility can reach 7 points, and the spirit can break through 3 points. Just from the comparison of attributes, Kai is 4 times stronger than Leon. This is just a comparison on paper. The actual comparison is even more terrifying. After all, attributes are not just superimposed to look good. Each attribute has its own role. Strength is not just strength, but also represents physical strength and adaptability to the environment. Agility represents speed, nerve reaction speed, balance and control level of the body. Spirit is the most difficult to understand. It represents the most things. Anyway, it includes everything related to the brain. Thinking speed, learning ability, memory ability, perception, sense of space, and even mysterious spiritual power, etc. After calculating these, Kai's actual strength is not 4 times that of Leon. It should be 10 times or even more, because it is not easy to quantify. But if Kai's strength is fully unleashed, in an absolutely fair environment, Kai can easily beat more than a dozen Leons by himself. If he uses the environment and tactics, Kai can kill more Leons. Reality is not a game. There are too many factors that affect the results. It is impossible for 2 people to play like a turn-based game, where you hit me once and I hit you again. In the actual environment, the gap between Kai and Leon will only be greater. With this comparison, you can imagine how strong Kai is now. This is because Kai used a lot of energy points on some skills, which resulted in his attributes not being too high. Otherwise, Kai would not need to use any skills or tactics, and would just punch Leon and turn him into meat paste. Leon certainly knew what Kai was asking, but he also had his own difficulties. Arthur is the future king, he cannot be hurt, knights must be loyal, this is a necessary virtue of knights. Arthur is a prince, he will definitely be the king in the future. He is the object of allegiance of all knights. As a knight, how could Leon hurt his monarch? That goes against his knightly way. Kai shook his head in disappointment and said word by word, he's a king, not a queen. Then Kai looked around and continued in a deep voice, do you think you are doing this for Arthur's own good? Let him live in a lie? Let him overestimate his own strength? Yes, you dare not and are unwilling to hurt him. But what about those enemies? What about those evil wizards? What about those terrible monsters? Will they let him go like you did? Will they not hurt him just because he is a prince? With these few words, all the knights present bowed their heads. Of course, there are still many who disagree. After all, they are the king's knights. Their duty is to protect the king. How could they let their king be hurt? Kai continued, he is a man, an heir to the throne. He will take you to the battlefield one day. As knights, do you want him to get hurt in training, or die on the battlefield? What should you choose? I don't need to remind you, right? King Uther didn't send Arthur here to play house with you. After that, Kai ignored what these people thought. He put away the longsword in his hand. Then he raised his head slightly and said to the knights arrogantly, in order to punish you for your dereliction of duty, each of you must run around the city wall 50 times. You are not allowed to take off your armor or rest. Now and immediately, Kai shouted the last sentence. No matter what the knights thought in their hearts, they could only run out of the city in a hurry. Don't say that Kai has no power. He is the adopted son of King Uther and has the status of a prince. This era is not an era with a sound legal system. This is a feudal society. Is there anything controversial about the royal family giving orders to knights? Chapter 13 Merlin. Kai's words could be heard throughout the training ground, but everyone's reaction was very different. King Uther only felt relieved when he heard it. He had many daily affairs and it was impossible for him to look after Arthur all the time, so many of Arthur's situations were reported by his subordinates. In addition, Arthur had completed some challenges and tasks very well before, so King Uther actually had no specific idea of his son's strength. He couldn't possibly compete with his son, he didn't have the time. But today Kai tore apart some of the lies that shrouded Arthur, allowing King Uther to see Arthur's true strength. Like Kai, King Uther would rather be a little harder on Arthur than let him die one day because of his lack of strength. King Uther knew very well that this era was not safe, especially for their Camelot. King Uther was not a warm and affectionate father, he was a standard wolf father. As long as he could be good to Arthur, he would not care about Arthur's feelings at all. If it were modern times, he would probably be scolded by various education experts or people from the Child Protection Association until he could not take care of himself, but the problem is that it is who knows how many years BC now, and this is not talked about at all. Arthur's sister, Princess Morgana, the adopted daughter of King Uther, was worried about Arthur with her maid. As for the others, what to say? Most people didn't feel anything, they just felt very happy to see these knights and princes being beaten. A typical mentality of eating melons, anyway, it has nothing to do with them. so of course they won't think so much. At this time, Kai also walked to Arthur, but seeing Arthur's current state, Kai's face was black. He asked Arthur to do horse stance. In a sense, he was going to punish him. But looking at his current appearance, he doesn't look like he is being punished. He was seen with a curtain on his head, drinking a little wine in his mouth, with fruits on the side, and a handsome servant helping him wipe his sweat and massage. It's almost like a vacation. Seeing Arthur like this, Kai's face turned black. At this time, Arthur was having a friendly negotiation with Merlin about Merlin's contempt for him before, and both sides hurt each other with sharp words. For a while, he didn't notice Kai's arrival at all. It was not until he felt the surroundings were quiet that Arthur and Merlin felt something was wrong. Our Prince Arthur is very comfortable. Do you want me to move another bed for you? Kai's gritted teeth sounded as if it came from hell, making the two good friends stiff all over and their brains blank. Arthur wanted to explain the current situation, but unfortunately, he didn't know how to cover up everything in front of him because he couldn't lie. These things were not actually made by Arthur for enjoyment. He was completely unhappy with Merlin's gloating, so he deliberately ordered Merlin to run around and let him not be idle. But now it seems that he has shot himself in the foot. About 10 minutes later, Arthur was carried to the center of the training ground by Kai, and the curtains, fruits and drinks disappeared. Arthur only got 5 buckets of water, 1 on his head, 2 on his arms, and the other 2 on his thighs. At the same time, there were 2 sharpened iron rods on the ground below his thighs. If Arthur lowered his body a little, he would be stabbed and scream. Kai requisitioned Arthur's curtains, wine, fruits and servants with peace of mind. By the way, Kai also asked Merlin to bring a recliner. Kai lay comfortably in the shadow under the curtain, drinking wine and eating fruits happily, and chatting with Arthur's servant Merlin. I saw you yesterday, but I didn't have time to ask your name at that time. Child, you can introduce yourself now. Kai did not know Merlin. After all, he had just returned, and Merlin was just a servant beside Arthur. Kai certainly would not go out of his way to ask about him. But just now, Kai saw the conversation between Arthur and Merlin, and knew that there was a real friendship between this child and Arthur. Since he was his brother's friend, Kai certainly had to care about him. Merlin was very excited. After all, Kai had become Merlin's new idol. Sir Kai, my name is Merlin, son of Hunas. Now I am the attendant of Arthur, His Highness Arthur. Sir Kai, you were really, too awesome just now. I have never seen such an awesome knight. You are like someone who came out of a legend. Merlin was a little nervous. Although Kai's attitude was approachable, Merlin was still a little nervous. Merlin didn't know where this nervousness came from. Merlin would not have felt this kind of inner nervousness when he met King Uther, but when facing Kai, he instinctively felt the pressure. What Merlin didn't know was that Kai, who was right in front of him, was also not at peace. Merlin. This name would not be unfamiliar to Kai in his previous life. After all, he was a famous wizard. Although Kai didn't know what great achievements Merlin had made at that time, he still knew that King Arthur became a great Night King with the help of the wizard Merlin. When Kai traveled, he also looked for Merlin's traces, but he didn't expect that no one in the entire Celtic countries knew who Merlin was. At that time, Kai thought Merlin was living in seclusion in some corner. At first, Kai's impression of Merlin was that he was a white-bearded old man like Gandalf, a kind of immortal who looked like a fairy. It was normal for him to live in seclusion. But Kai never expected that the Merlin in this world was actually, not a white-bearded old man, but a handsome and delicate young man, and he was just a civilian, and he ran to Arthur's side but served. Merlin? Well, what a good name. I once heard that a person with this name would become a great wizard. Kai decided to give it a try, because the name Merlin was not very special. Although Kai had never met a Merlin so far, what if? Kai was still very willing to talk to Merlin Gandalf, because according to legend, the great wizard Merlin knew everything. Maybe he knew a way to get himself home? But reality crushed Kai's dream of a white-robed wizard. Merlin was shocked when he heard the words great wizard. His pupils shrank. The excitement of fans seeing stars disappeared without a trace. He stammered nervously. Ha-ha-ha, wizards, Camelot has banned magic for many years, how can I, ha-ha-ha, you are really joking, okay, this guy is Merlin. Kai said silently in his heart. After all, this guy's reaction was too strong. Kai only said that a person named Merlin could become a great wizard, but the child in front of him actually put it on himself without hesitation, he confessed. More importantly, Kai sensed the magic fluctuations at the moment when Merlin lost his mind. By the way, I forgot to say that Kai is also a wizard, and he is quite good. His 40 points of spirit are not white. But Kai is different from other Celtic wizards. Their paths are completely different. Kai's spells all come from the outside world. So it is easy to feel the magic fluctuations on Merlin. Interestingly, the magic fluctuations on Merlin are very strange and seem to be perfectly hidden. Otherwise, Kai should have been able to tell that he was a wizard the first time he saw him. Chapter 14, Fateful Encounter. Kai did not expose the child, at least not in broad daylight. This is Camelot, magic is taboo, anyone who has anything to do with it will die. Even Kai was very careful to hide the fact that he knew magic. So there was no need to cause trouble for this child. This child had no malice in him. He was Arthur's friend. Kai could see that when he was with Arthur, he was closer to the kind of friend Kai had in his mind, instead of being submissive and respectful to Arthur like other people. Arthur needed such a friend. What's more, his name was Merlin. So Kai quickly changed the subject. Merlin, son of Unas? This name is a woman's. What's your father's? In this era, when introducing yourself to others, especially in more formal situations, you will bring your father's name. For example, when Arthur introduces himself to others, he will say, Arthur, son of Uther. This is not to show off, but a kind of frankness and solemnity. He represents that the introducer will not do anything rude, because that will insult the dignity of his father. Of course, if the family has a long history or has produced great figures, this introduction will be longer, such as adding your great-great-great-grandfather or something. But this is a bit of a show-off. But few people will report their mother's name. There is no such thing as gender equality in this era. Kai asked casually, just chatting about family matters. But unexpectedly, Merlin became depressed in an instant. I don't have a father. I don't know who my father is. My mother never said that I was raised by my mother. Kai didn't expect that his words would hurt others. So he hurriedly apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I hope you can forgive me. Kai came from modern society, so he didn't care much about class differences, but Merlin was different. Although his talent made him proud, he lived in this society and was bound to be bound by social rules. It was an unchangeable fact that his status was very different from Kai's. He was a commoner, while Kai was a nobleman and the adopted son of King Uther. He never thought that a big man like Kai would apologize to him because of a word. Merlin was a little at a loss for such treatment. Sir, no, you don't need to apologize, it's nothing, really. Merlin's face turned red, he felt so embarrassed. He actually performed so poorly in front of such a noble man. Kai looked at the anxious Merlin and smiled. He didn't continue this topic. After all, if he really continued, it would not be an apology, but embarrassing the child. Your mother must be a great woman. She taught you very well, Merlin. When you introduce yourself to others in the future, you can proudly bring your mother's name. It's not shameful. On the contrary, you should be proud that you have such a mother. Kai was not being polite. Even in modern society, it is not an easy thing for a single mother to raise a child independently, let alone before the common era. The people here are not enlightened, extremely backward and ignorant. A widow, or a widow who gave birth to a child with a man of unknown origin, you can imagine how she will live. There are many troubles in front of a widow, which is not just a Chinese saying. This kind of thing happens in every era and every region. But even so, this lady Huna still raised Merlin, and it seems that she has trained him well. This is even more precious. For such a lady, Kai has deep respect from the bottom of his heart. Merlin, who was at a loss just now, immediately showed a childlike smile when he heard Kai praising his mother so sincerely. He was indeed proud of his mother. She raised him up alone with great effort, and also taught him the principles of being a man. What reason did Merlin have not to be proud of? Thank you, Sir Kai. If Eunice knew that a noble lord like you praised her so much, she would be very happy. Kai smiled and did not comment. Although he had never met this lady, Kai knew very well that the happiest thing for this lady was definitely not that she was praised by herself, but that her child was recognized and praised by others. This is what a mother hopes for and is most proud of. This can be seen from the fact that Huna sent Merlin, a commoner, to Gaius as an apprentice. This is not a short-sighted woman. After talking to Merlin about his mother for a few more sentences, Kai asked Merlin how he met Arthur and became friends with him. "Oh, you're talking about this?" Then Merlin vividly described their encounter. "A few months ago, Merlin came to Gaius, the pharmacist of the royal family, as an apprentice with his mother's letter. It went smoothly at the beginning. Gaius liked Merlin because of who-ness. Merlin was smart and kind, and it was easy for him to get recognition from others, until he met Arthur, who was making trouble in the city on his way to deliver medicine again. Arthur was not an obedient child. Like all energetic children, he liked to make trouble to vent his energy that had nowhere to go. So Arthur often bullied people. Of course, Arthur was not the kind of second-generation ancestor who did all kinds of evil. He just liked the excitement, but he had a plan. He just took it as fun, so people in the city didn't have much bad feelings towards Arthur. It was just a kid's mischief. Who would take it seriously? But Merlin didn't know, so when Arthur bullied someone, Merlin stood up. He was not afraid of Arthur, and even choked Arthur with harsh words, although he was immediately suppressed by Arthur and locked in the square to have people throw rotten vegetable leaves at him. This was considered a feud with Arthur. After that, the two encountered twice more, and each time Merlin's mouth cannon prevailed, and then he was suppressed by Arthur in force. Until the last time, Arthur directly asked Merlin to pick up a weapon, and the two sides wanted to settle the feud. In fact, it was Merlin's sharp words that made Arthur extremely unhappy, and he planned to beat him up openly. The process of the competition was very tortuous. In Merlin's narration, Merlin relied on his wisdom to play Arthur around. But Arthur complained on the side that it was just his bad luck. Every time he tried to attack Merlin, his weapon was either stuck in some strange place or his feet tripped over something. However, the result was still the same as before, and Merlin was defeated again. But this time Arthur did not punish him, but felt that Merlin had extraordinary courage, so the two of them had a good impression of each other for the first time. Later, a witch tried to get into the palace to kill Arthur in order to avenge her son, who was beheaded by King Uther, so that King Uther could taste the pain of losing a son. As a result, all this was destroyed by Merlin's accidental collision, and Arthur's life was saved. In order to reward Merlin, King Uther made Merlin Arthur's attendant. This also started their friendship. "Oh," Kai pulled a long tone and squinted his eyes at Arthur, who was already sweating profusely on the side. This is not tired, but scared. Sometimes, Kai has decided that it is indeed King Arthur in the transmission, with an enviable talent. After being tossed by Kai, he still stood up. You must know that Kai's method comes from a movie of Chang Long that he watched in his previous life. In the movie, Chang Long relied on this training method that is impossible to achieve in reality to learn peerless martial arts and kill the villain boss. But this kind of ridiculous training method did not faze Arthur. Although it was very hard for Arthur at the beginning, he managed to hold on. Now, he has adapted to it. But now that Kai's looking at him like this, Arthur feels that his whole life is so tiring. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Punishment. Our little Arthur actually has such a naughty side. It's really a pity for me as a brother that I can't see the lively side of our little Arthur. Don't you think so, little Arthur? Although he said something to miss Arthur's liveliness, as long as he was not stupid, he could hear that Kai was unhappy with Arthur bullying others. Arthur also had a premonition that he was going to be in big trouble. At this time, Arthur really wanted to throw away the mess on his body, rush over, press Merlin to the ground and beat him up. Two-pit. Merlin, Kai smiled at Arthur and said, "Go and get me some iron blocks to put in the bucket. I think our energetic His Highness Arthur should be fine." Merlin didn't expect that he was just simply telling some interesting stories about his encounter with Arthur, but he ended up punishing Arthur with Sir Kai. Although Merlin didn't know why Kai, who was only the adopted son of King Uther, could punish Arthur, the legitimate prince, so casually, he could see that everyone here seemed to think it was normal. So he didn't dare to refuse. After all, Kai was not Arthur. He could get along with Arthur freely, but Merlin didn't dare to disobey Kai. Merlin looked at Arthur with great regret, and Arthur looked at Merlin desperately. While he kept begging with his eyes, his head was still shaking slightly, obviously asking Merlin not to go. Merlin struggled in his heart for about 3 seconds. When he saw Kai's eyes shifted from Arthur, Merlin immediately made a decision. "Yes, my lord." Then he turned his head to look at Arthur. He felt a little sorry for Arthur, but he had no choice. After all, he was just a servant, right? However, before Merlin took 2 steps, a fairy saved Arthur, who was about to fall into the abyss of despair. "Merlin, come here and help Wenger get the wine. This is Sir Kai's favorite wine. If it is spilled, Sir Kai will be unhappy." It was Morgana. She came to the training ground at some point, followed by Wenger with food and wine. Wenger is a healthy girl, usually good at work, but now she looks a little embarrassed with a lot of things. Merlin was a little disappointed when he saw Morgana and Wenger. Humph. He was not disappointed because he couldn't bear to see Arthur in trouble. "Okay, princess." After saying that, Merlin took the wine jug and several other things from Wenger. At the same time, he winked at Wenger. Obviously he saw through Princess Morgana's trick. Wenger secretly grinned at Merlin, expressing helplessness. "Kai, Arthur, it's lunchtime now, and the games between boys should come to an end." Morgana tried her best to act more natural. She rarely lied, especially to Kai. Morgana was only a few years old when she came to the palace. At that time, Morgana's father died in the war. It can be said that she had no relatives and came to the palace to live under the roof of others. It was Kai who saved Morgana, who felt extremely lonely at the time. He guided and accompanied Morgana like a father and a brother until Morgana became cheerful again. Morgana was still a little uncomfortable with lying in front of Kai, but as a sister, she couldn't bear to see Arthur continue to be punished. Arthur had been squatting like that for almost 2 hours. Facing Morgana's invitation to lunch, Arthur was like seeing a savior. He first looked at Morgana with gratitude, and then looked at Kai with pleading. He knew that Kai would only relax his punishment under one condition, that is, meal time. Kai once said that the biggest thing in the world is eating. Kai pulled the corner of his mouth and looked at the sun in the sky. It was less than 11 o'clock now, and it was still a little too early to eat. But seeing Arthur's pitiful eyes and Morgana's earnest expectations, what else can Kai say? So Arthur escaped. But only now, Arthur's life in the future is completely in trouble. With Kai's return, Arthur, the prince who wandered around Camelot all day, rarely appeared in front of people now. His daily life now was like living in hell. Every morning at 6 o'clock before dawn, he would be pulled out of bed by Kay. If he dared to resist, he would be poured with a basin of ice water and then beaten. After getting up, he would run 10 laps around the city wall while the whole city was still asleep, which was considered a warm-up. Then he would do horse stance. At about 8 o'clock, he would have breakfast. After breakfast, he would have an hour's rest time, but even during this rest time, he did not relax at all. Although there was no physical activity, he had to learn various knowledge from the Grand Maester. At 9 o'clock, he was allowed to rest for 15 minutes, and then he would go to the training ground to have martial arts training with Sir Kay. It was called training, but in fact it was a brutal beating. According to Kay, if you want to learn to attack, you must first learn to be beaten. Arthur did not resist before, but it was useless, because no matter how he resisted, he would still be beaten. After 2 hours of martial arts training, he could get half an hour to rest, and then it was lunch. Lunch was from 11:30 to 1:30 in the afternoon, and he could use these 2 hours as he pleased. He could eat slowly, or he could choose to finish eating quickly and then take a short nap. After 1:30 p.m., he still warmed up first, then did special training, with additional horse stance. At 4 p.m., he started actual combat training. This time, the target was the Knights of the Knights Templar. It could be foot combat or horse combat, and Arthur could choose the project himself. However, unlike before, if the knights lost to Arthur, they would be punished. On the contrary, if they could defeat Arthur faster, they would be rewarded. Although the reward was not too much, 5 gold coins were not too little. In this way, the knights would naturally do their best to deal with Arthur. At 6 o'clock, the sun completely set, and Arthur's day was officially over. The next time was up to Arthur himself. Of course, he could party all night, but he had to get up on time at 6 o'clock the next morning. And Arthur, who was tossed half to death, basically fell asleep after dinner and had no energy to think about anything else. Such days lasted for a month, and Arthur even thought about running away from home. But he only fantasized about it in private when he was upset. If he really did it, he wouldn't dare. Besides, Arthur was not ungrateful. He certainly knew that Kay was doing it for his own good. And although a month was not a long time, Arthur himself could find that he had made obvious progress, not to mention others. King Uther was very pleased. He had always thought that he was strict enough with Arthur, but after seeing Kay's way, he felt that he seemed to be too doting on Arthur. So he was very relieved to let Kay do what he wanted. After all, the facts have proved that Kay's way of education is more correct. Morgana felt sorry for Arthur and tried every means to create opportunities for Arthur to relax. For example, she would find ways to send meals to Kay and bring Arthur's portion. He would prepare a lot of food and wine to make lunch last longer. In this regard, Kay and King Uther were a little helpless. They couldn't stop Morgana from feeling sorry for her brother, right? Moreover, King Uther was very happy to see the deep brotherly love between Morgana and Arthur for some unspeakable reasons, so he would not say anything. But even so, Morgana was still not satisfied. She often complained to King Uther and Kai that their actions were too inhumane to Arthur. Although Kai and King Uther did not agree with this, they still had to consider Morgana's attitude. So today, Kai took a half-day off for the first time. This made Arthur almost cry with joy. These days, he spent every day training, being beaten, and beating others, which made him feel that his brain was about to break down. He had to relax. Chapter 16 Gaius. There is a reason why Kai gave Arthur half a day off today. Morgana's wishes are of course part of the reason, but the bigger reason is that someone has returned to the palace. That is Gaius, the royal pharmacist. As the royal pharmacist, Gaius has a very high status. This old man with the little big eyes and a weird personality has served 2 generations of kings, King Uther and King Uther's father, with his superb medical skills and knowledge of medicine. At the same time, he is also a good friend of King Uther. Perhaps only Gaius knows King Uther best in the world. Gaius knows all of King Uther's secrets, and King Uther is happy to share these secrets with Gaius. Because Gaius will not only not reveal these secrets to the outside world, but also give King Uther the most correct suggestions. He is a good friend and a top consultant. King Uther is used to discussing many things in the kingdom with Gaius. Some time ago, a king of a neighboring country was seriously ill and came to King Uther, hoping that Gaius could help. Gaius's ability is well known in all countries. King Uther was a king who loved his face. Facing the request of his neighbor, he certainly would not refuse. So he agreed decisively. So Gaius went abroad for more than a month and missed Kai's return perfectly. Although Gaius had a high status, it was not necessary to prepare a return banquet for him in a grand manner. It was just a month since they had met, so there was no need for such a grand ceremony. However, Morgana felt sorry for her brother and tried every means to let her brother have a rest, so she enthusiastically proposed to hold a welcome banquet for Gaius. Seeing her like this, King Uther was willing to be generous to his old friend. So he agreed directly. In this way, Arthur was liberated for a day. At the banquet, Arthur drank fine wine and almost shed tears. Since Kai gave him special training, he said goodbye to alcoholic beverages. Kai was not against drinking, but he was a little dissatisfied with Arthur drinking. Nothing else, Arthur was too young. 19 years old, in Kai's previous life, such a child would be either a senior high school student or a freshman, neither of which is the age for drinking. His body is still developing, not suitable for drinking, and the self-control ability of children at this age is not as strong as imagined, and it is easy to develop some bad habits. Kai actually knows that his thinking is very old-fashioned, but Kai is really not very good at educating children, so he simply copied his education to Arthur. Anyway, he doesn't think there's anything wrong with his education, so he has grown up well, right? And he looks good, at least he is a useful person to society. So Kai thinks that this kind of successful experience is not a pity. In short, because of Kai's old-fashionedness, Arthur has not drunk alcohol for almost a month, and now he feels like he has met a relative when he touches alcohol. This also caused Arthur to be sincere and passionate when he was an auxiliary word for Gaius, which frightened Gaius. He never thought that he would be so liked by Arthur. Arthur is not a good student, and he is quite incompatible with Gaius, a scholar, so although the relationship between the two is good, it is definitely not warm. Morgana was more liked by Gaius. The same was true for Kai. Gaius was Kai's enlightenment teacher, and Kai's education in his previous life also emphasized respecting teachers. So he respected Gaius very much, which also led to Gaius's liking for Kai very much. The two hadn't seen each other for 10 years. Now that they finally met, they naturally had to have a good chat. The two simply sat in a corner of the banquet hall, holding wine glasses and chatting while drinking. As mentioned earlier, Gaius was a weirdo, and he didn't like this noisy scene. If he could choose, he would prefer to find a quiet place to have a good chat with Kai. He was also very interested in Kai's experience traveling abroad. By the way, I forgot to say that Gaius was also a wizard. He might be the only wizard in Camelot who was accepted by King Uther. Kai once found a magic book from Gaius, a very ancient one. Even so, Gaius hadn't used magic for more than 10 years, and the magic fluctuations on his body were also weak to a certain level. It was estimated that it would not be long before he would completely lose the favor of magic. Even Kai was not very clear about what happened. He just knew that it seemed to be related to one of his vows. Everyone was very satisfied tonight. Although Gaius did not like this environment, he was still very grateful for everyone's kindness. Arthur was even more so. He wanted to hug Gaius and cry so that he could stand up and stop his father and brother from torturing him. Morgana was also very satisfied because she was the one who made the decision and organized the dinner. King Uther seemed to be deliberately cultivating her ability in this area and made her the temporary hostess of this palace. As for why, it was self-evident. In short, although Morgana was a little shy, she still completed it very seriously. Organizing a banquet is a skill that a noble woman must master. The same is true for Merlin. Although he does not have to suffer as much as Arthur's attendant, his life is also not easy. Now that Gaius is back, he can completely reduce the time he spends with Arthur. After all, he is Gaius's apprentice. It is reasonable to learn potions and medical knowledge from Gaius. As for Arthur, he will get better. King Uther was also very happy. His adopted son came back with all the glory and wealth. His biological son was getting better day by day. His adopted daughter in name only, but his biological daughter in reality, could be handed over to a reliable man with peace of mind. Now he was learning the skills of a noble woman. He would marry her and live a happy life as long as the time was right. King Uther felt that soon, he would have no other extravagant wishes in his life. But at this moment, danger began to gradually approach Camelot. After all, the gears of fate had begun to rotate, and no one could escape the arrangement of fate. In the morning, Kai woke up on time at 5:40. This was his habit in his previous life. Unless there were special circumstances, he would go to bed early and get up early. He would get up at 5:40, complete personal hygiene in 20 minutes, start training at 6 o'clock, and have breakfast at 8 o'clock. This was a habit brought back from his military career. When he was an officer, he was the first to get up every day. Later, when he became a policeman, he did not forget this habit, and when he came to this world, this habit did not change. It has been the same for decades. But just when she was about to wake Arthur up, she found Morgana's maid Wenger running in the corridor in panic as if she was on fire. Kai naturally wanted to stop her to find out what happened. As a result, Gwen told him the bad news that Morgana was seriously ill and in a coma. Chapter 17 Encephalitis. At noon, in Morgana's room, almost all the members of the royal family were here. King Uther sat at the head of the bed, holding Morgana's hand, and nervously looked at Gaius on the other side. Arthur and Merlin also stood at the door, and Kai stood behind King Uther with a gloomy face. Everyone was waiting for Gaius's diagnosis. Gaius put his fingers on Morgana's neck, then pulled open Morgana's eyelids, carefully observing the changes in Morgana's pupils. After almost 10 minutes, Gaius gently tucked Morgana's quilt, and then turned to King Uther with a serious expression. "How is it?" "Gaius, is my Morgana okay?" King Uther asked hopefully. No matter which parent hopes that their children will never get sick, even if they get sick, it should be a serious disease that is not serious. King Uther is of course no exception. He even hopes that Morgana was just tired from preparing for the banquet yesterday. I'm sorry, my majesty, Gaius is a pharmacist. This profession is actually a doctor in this era, and in fact it is. Gaius is the best doctor in all the countries, otherwise he would not be sent by Gaius to treat a king of the neighboring country. But because of this, Gaius must not lie. The most important thing for a doctor is not to conceal the condition. It's encephalitis. All of Morgana's clinical manifestations are exactly the same as those of late-stage encephalitis. Gaius will not admit this mistake. In this era, although encephalitis is not common, it is not rare. Many children may have this disease. Generally speaking, this disease is rarely fatal. At most, it will hinder brain development and cause sequelae such as polio. But sometimes, there is a chance of being fatal. Once it reaches this level, the performance is similar to Morgana. High fever, coma, and dilated pupils. Often at this point, it is basically incurable. How could it be? King Uther suddenly felt a little dizzy, and his eyes went black. If he hadn't supported the bed with his hands in time, King Uther would probably fall to the ground. Kai, who was standing by, was quick to support King Uther. Uther, Kai said worriedly. King Uther pushed Kai's hand away, shook his head to Kai to indicate that he was fine, and then turned to look at Gaius. How could this happen? How could Morgana have this damn encephalitis? Encephalitis is known as the killer of young children. It is a disease that many families with children guard against. King Uther has raised 3 children, so it is natural that he cannot be unaware of it. This disease is more common in young children. Morgana is already 23 years old. How could she get this disease? Gaius also didn't understand how Morgana got this disease. Age is one aspect, and on the other hand, this disease has obvious precursors, such as fever, headache, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, impaired consciousness, etc. for several consecutive days. Morgana's current symptoms may only appear when it develops to the end. The process in between was completely omitted. When the banquet ended last night, Gaius saw Morgana. She looked energetic and there was no sign of illness at all. How could she develop into this in just a few hours? Of course, Gaius felt that it was useless to worry about this now. After all, the person is already like this, the process is no longer important. Besides, this phenomenon is not impossible. After all, encephalitis is an infection of the brain. So the pathogens and symptoms of each person's infection will be different. Morgana is just a little faster, which is not against common sense. Maybe it's a serious infection. Gaius could only tell King Uther his guess. As a good friend of King Uther, Gaius naturally knew that his old friend was not a good-tempered person. If he didn't make it clear and let him think about it, it might cause a more serious situation at any time. In fact, King Uther didn't have the mind to think about how Morgana got sick now. He wanted to know more about how to treat it now. Gaius, you must have a way, right? Gaius opened his mouth, a little embarrassed. In this case, it can basically be declared hopeless, but seeing his old friend's eyes red and the whole person depressed by more than 10 years, he couldn't refuse. I will use some sleeping pills to prevent Morgana's condition from getting worse, and then I will find a way. Gaius could only say this. As for the certainty, he didn't have a point. He was just a doctor, not a god. But King Uther didn't think so. Like all the patients' families, he felt that since the doctor was here, he would definitely be able to cure his family. So King Uther's mood temporarily stabilized. He sat at the head of the bed, holding Morgana's hand with pity, kissed it gently, and whispered softly, "Don't worry, my girl, Father will definitely cure you, for sure." Almost everyone was very worried about the current state of King Uther and Morgana, with only one exception. That was Kai. This person who should not remain calm the most, but he did not panic from beginning to end. Although he looked worried on the surface, in fact, his eyes were unusually calm. However, no one noticed Kai's calmness, only Merlin. Merlin's perception was very strong, and he regarded this as a benefit of his magical talent. So he was sensitive to Kai's abnormality. Merlin didn't want to think of the worst, but he didn't understand, is Sir Kai really that kind of cold-blooded person? Kai stood behind King Uther, sorting out all the information about the whole thing in his mind, and then sorting it out to see if there was any problem. Suddenly, Kai found someone spying on him. He turned his head and saw Merlin looking at him. Kai didn't find it strange. The name Merlin almost destined him to be a gifted wizard. Moreover, he had observed Merlin personally. His talent was indeed very strong, at least much stronger than Kai, who was a half-baked one. After staring at Merlin for almost half a second, Kai gave Merlin a subtle look, letting him experience it himself. Seeing Kai winking at him, Merlin was immediately startled, and then lowered his head in panic. King Uther finally calmed down at this time, and Kai decided to do his own thing. "Gwen," Kai gently called Gwen, a black girl who was worried and crying, over. Others didn't know what Kai was going to do, but seeing that King Uther didn't care, they naturally wouldn't interfere. Gwen was called over by Kai, but she felt very uncomfortable. On the one hand, she was worried about Morgana's situation, and on the other hand, she was a little uneasy. After all, as the princess's maid, she was responsible for the princess's current situation. She was a little afraid that Kai would hold her accountable. After all, King Uther's reputation was really not that good, and it was only too normal for him to implicate a few people for Princess Morgana. Chapter 18, Strange. Kai comforted Gwen and reassured her. After she was calm, Kai started to ask questions. Gwen, don't think about anything else. Now, I need you to recall carefully whether Morgana has encountered any strange things or strange people in the past few days. Don't rush to answer. Think about it first and recall carefully. Don't rush. Any unusual things will do, even if they are small, Kai asked gently. At this time, Merlin was also a little curious and wanted to follow secretly in the hope of hearing what Kai was saying. But just as he was about to move, he was stopped by Arthur. What are you doing? This is Morgana's room. I can bring you here, which is the limit. If you go in again, Uther will be unhappy. Arthur was also distressed. Arthur always felt that Merlin liked Morgana. Although this was true, Merlin never admitted it. But Arthur was sure that Merlin was interested in Morgana. Merlin was Arthur's friend. Originally, Arthur should support his friends when they like someone. But the problem is that if the person Merlin likes is Morgana, it will be a different story. Not to mention that Morgana and Kay are childhood sweethearts and have a lot in common. The status gap between Morgana and Merlin alone determines that this secret love has no future. The best outcome is that Merlin is beaten half to death by Uther and Kay and thrown out of Camelot, and more importantly, Arthur doesn't know how to help him. After all, one is his father and the other is his brother. Although Arthur doesn't like to distinguish who is more important to him, but reality is always helpless. No matter how good his relationship with Merlin is, it is impossible for him to surpass his family. Arthur saw Merlin trying to enter the room. He thought Merlin was worried about Morgana. After all, that was his secret crush. Morgana was like this now. Arthur himself was also very sad, but he still comforted her firmly. Listen, Merlin, although the truth is hurtful, it is impossible for you and Morgana. She already has Kai, and, in short, what you have to do is forget her. You can find someone better, although I don't think there's anyone who can compare to Morgana, but you know, people always face reality and look at it more openly. Also, don't show your little thoughts, otherwise I can't guarantee what Kai and Uther will do. Hearing Arthur's comfort, Merlin was simply laughing and crying, although his words were generally correct. But the problem is that no one would comfort people like Arthur. If you don't know, you would think that Arthur is despising and mocking Merlin. In short, because of Arthur's kindness, Merlin could only stand still. This is the palace, and Merlin is just a servant. It is already a special favor for him to walk to the princess's door. Although the Celts don't want to care about the separation of men and women like the ancient Chinese, it is not allowed to let a male servant walk into the princess's room when the princess is lying on the bed. On Wenger's side, Kai's voice seemed to have magic, which made Wenger's mood much more stable. She also began to recall recent events according to Kai's request. But she recalled several times and didn't find anything strange. These days, Morgana was busy taking care of Arthur and Kai, and she didn't go out at all. The people she met and the things she did were no different from usual. But now Morgana has become like this, it must be that nothing happened. So Wenger also began to recall again and again. Although she didn't know what the use was, as long as she could help Morgana, she was willing to do it even in small things. Seeing Wenger was thinking, Arthur didn't interrupt. He began to look at Morgana's room. Kai was more familiar with this room than anyone else, so he finished looking at it quickly. After all, Morgana was not a girl who liked luxury. Most of the things in her room were familiar to Kai, and there were few new ones. The only change might be the bunch of lilies at the head of Morgana's bed. It seemed that it was changed yesterday, and the flowers were blooming. Morgana liked flowers, and Kai knew this very well, so he didn't think it was anything strange. But just when Kai was about to go and see if anyone had tampered with other things, Wenger suddenly clapped his hands and said, I figured it out, it's flowers. It's flowers. Wenger was a little too absorbed in his thoughts, so he didn't control the volume well, and everyone looked over. Including King Uther. Flowers? What flowers? And, Wenger, what are you doing? Morgana is sick, she needs to rest. You can't shout here. King Uther was in a bad mood, especially Wenger's surprised tone, which made him even angrier. As a maid, you didn't take good care of the princess, which was originally a dereliction of duty. Now you are shouting in front of the princess's bed. You are simply unforgivable. Guards, King Uther was angry, and Wenger obviously gave him a way to vent. As a tyrant, it is not uncommon for him to kill people when he is angry. If the guards really let Wenger take Wenger away, then Wenger's end will definitely not be good. Wait, just when Arthur and Merlin were about to plead for Wenger, Kai took the lead and stood up. My king, Wenger didn't mean it, but because I was asking her for some important clues, so, please forgive her. After all, your majesty will make a maid like her with a low status go blank, which is not helpful to find out why Morgana is like this, so please calm down. Kai's words immediately calmed Uther down a lot. Especially the reason Kai found was to find out why Morgana became like this, which directly hit the point that King Uther was most concerned about now. This is also the difference between Kai and Arthur and Morgana. In the Celtic court, it seems that no one taught them the art of speaking. For example, if they think something is not done well, they will point it out directly to the face. Well, this is very upright, but very stupid. King Uther is not only their father, but also a king. No matter whether your motivation for pointing out a king's mistakes in person is good or bad, but you let a king admit that he is wrong in front of others. Isn't this equivalent to stripping the king's face in disguise? Even ordinary people will be ashamed and angry when others point out their mistakes without any tact, let alone a king. Of course, Arthur and Morgana would not have any bad intentions towards King Uther, but they often only thought that they were right, but never considered King Uther's face. This behavior is simply stupid. Some things can be achieved in a better way, why choose the least efficient and worst way? Look, when Kai said this, he praised King Uther and advised him tactfully. King Uther immediately felt good. Why did he insist on his momentary impulse? King Uther was persuaded by Kai, and he really didn't let the guards come over. Instead, he immediately grasped the point and asked, "You mean, Morgana's illness is strange?" Of course, Kai actually determined in the first second when he entered Morgana's room that Morgana's illness was definitely man-made, and it was caused by magic. As mentioned earlier, Kai is a good wizard. Although he is not the same as the Celtic wizard, some things are the same no matter which nation's spells, such as curses. Every curse carries a deep malice, which is the same everywhere, and Kai found this malice in Morgana. She was cursed. But Kai didn't learn Celtic magic after all, so it was difficult to solve this problem without making a fuss. Curses were always troublesome, and Kai was not sure if he would cause any harm to Morgana if he really took action, so he wanted to find out who was behind the curse through investigation, so that he could solve the problem from the source. Anyway, no matter what kind of curse it was, finding the person who cast the curse was the most direct and clear way. Chapter 19 Calm. After persuading King Uther to stay calm, Kai comforted Wenger again and stabilized her emotions. After all, King Uther really intended to let the guards kill Wenger just now, and no one present doubted this. After Wenger finally believed that King Uther would not do anything to her, she continued to ask questions. Is there anything special about this flower? Kai pointed to the bouquet of lilies and asked. Most girls like flowers, and Morgana is no exception, so Kai was not surprised at all that there was a bouquet of freshly picked flowers in her room. So he didn't think about it at first. Now that Wenger mentioned this bouquet of flowers, Kai naturally knew that there was something to it, otherwise Wenger would not have taken it out alone. This is a flower given to the princess by someone else. Wenger looked at Kai cautiously, and then said a little timidly. Flowers given by others? What's so strange about this? At this time, Arthur didn't know if he couldn't beat Merlin, so he brought Merlin over. King Uther saw Merlin and frowned in dissatisfaction. He felt that this place was not suitable for a male servant like Merlin to be present. But before he could say anything, Arthur quickly took up the conversation and drew King Uther's attention away. Doesn't someone send flowers to Morgana every day? What's so special about this bouquet of flowers? As expected, King Uther's attention was immediately diverted when he heard this. He was thinking about his daughter now and didn't care about other things, let alone a small figure like Merlin. Kai also looked over. Although he didn't know that Morgana received flowers every day, in Kai's opinion, this was nothing special. First of all, Morgana was very beautiful. In the Celtic countries, Morgana's beauty was famous. She was once even called the most beautiful woman in the countries. Secondly, Morgana was very favored by King Uther, and Camelot was also famous for its strength and wealth in the entire Celtic countries. If he could marry Morgana, he would definitely get both money and people. It was no joke to save 20 years of hard work. So it was not surprising that Morgana had many suitors. It would be strange if Morgana lacked suitors. Although Kai was a little unhappy about this, he was not so petty as to blame Morgana. After all, She was beautiful and had a good father. It was not her fault. Wenger looked at Kai again, and then said as if to clarify, since Sir Kai came back, no one has sent flowers. After all, everyone knows the relationship between Sir Kai and the princess. Hearing this, everyone looked at Kai, and King Uther nodded with satisfaction. He thought this was very good. Although he didn't think there was anything wrong with someone sending flowers to his daughter, it just showed that his daughter was good enough. But now Kai and Morgana have confirmed their relationship, so this kind of thing should be avoided if possible. After all, he is very optimistic about the combination of Kai and Morgana. He even sincerely hopes that the two of them can be happy, so those who make trouble should naturally disappear quickly. Kai didn't pay much attention to this before. He only knew that Morgana's room would be replaced with new flowers every once in a while. As for where those flowers came from, he never cared. In that case, what's the matter with this bouquet of flowers? Although Wenger didn't say it explicitly, Kai could guess that no one had sent flowers recently. On the one hand, it was because he came back, and on the other hand, it might be related to Morgana's own wishes. No matter what, there are always some people in this world who think they are special. Besides, Kai and Morgana are not married, so they naturally have a chance. Even if we take a step back, even if they really get married, it is not impossible. England in this wild age is not China, and the attitude towards marriage is not so sacred and serious. Even in England in later generations, there are still people who enjoy the relationship between ladies and knights. After figuring this out, although Kai didn't say anything for the sake of face, he was still happy in his heart. As a man, who doesn't like his girl to only like him and disdain other suitors? This is what I find strange. When I came to the palace yesterday morning, a man asked me to give this bouquet of flowers to the princess, and then I gave it to him. I completely forgot how I promised him, and I don't even remember what the man looks like. In fact, until just now, if I hadn't seen Sir Kay notice the bouquet of flowers, I would have ignored that a bouquet was sent by someone else. At this moment, everyone's eyes became gloomy. Only Merlin was a little confused and didn't understand what was going on. King Uther was the first to react. He was furious and said in a ferocious voice, "Witchcraft. It's witchcraft. Those damn wizards still want to destroy Camelot. This group of despicable damn rats are now targeting my daughter. Damn it. Damn it." King Uther could no longer suppress his inner irritability. He drew his sword and shouted loudly, "Guards! Guards! Guards!" Only then did Merlin finally react. Morgana became like this because of witchcraft. After all, no one here is a fool. Gwen's words just now have revealed enough information. Princess Morgana has refused flowers from outsiders for a month. Gwen should know best that other people can't send flowers directly to the princess. Although the princesses of the Celtic countries are not as wealthy as the ancient Chinese princesses, they are still princesses after all. How can anyone contact her? If others want to send flowers, they must go through Wenger. But Wenger inexplicably agreed to send flowers to someone else even though he knew Morgana refused. And afterwards, she not only didn't remember it at all, but also didn't feel anything wrong. The meaning of this is very intriguing. In addition, Morgana's illness was unclear, so it was not surprising to think that it was caused by a wizard. Thinking of this, Merlin's face changed immediately, because it meant that King Uther was going to kill. King Uther's rejection of magic and witchcraft was known to the whole of Camelot. He always insisted on killing the wrong person rather than letting him go. I don't know how many people will be killed now. Merlin wanted to stop it, but was immediately stopped by Gaius's eyes. Merlin is very kind, but like all young people, they are always impulsive and reckless. In short, they are a little ignorant of the world. Merlin stopped King Uther? Why did he, Merlin, stop it? Just because he felt he was right? This is not a fantasy paradise, this is reality. A servant actually wants to stop a king from giving orders. This is simply a joke. If Merlin really did this, the biggest possibility is that the first person to be killed today would be Merlin himself. Wait. But before Merlin could stand up, another person stood up and stopped King Uther. My king, please wait a moment. If someone else stood up to stop King Uther when he was furious, that person would definitely be in big trouble, but if it was Kai, it would be a different story. Kai? Are you crazy? Why did you stop me? Don't you want to save Morgana? King Uther didn't understand Kai's behavior. Logically speaking, the one who shouldn't stop him in the whole room was Kai. Morgana is his fiancée. No. On the contrary, I'm saving Morgana by doing this. My king, please calm down, we must figure out what's going on before we can decide what to do next. Have you forgotten? It was you who taught me that I can't be reckless in anything, I must think clearly before taking action. I am following your teachings now. Teaching others the truth is actually the simplest thing. It's not difficult to just move your lips. But people are always used to teaching others, but it is another matter when it comes to themselves. Uther's reaction just illustrates this point. Find out? Isn't it clear now? That damn wizard killed my Morgana. He must be hanged. No. I will chop him into minced meat. And feed him to the dogs. In King Uther's opinion, everything is now clear and there is no need to check it anymore. Then please give me a few minutes, just a few minutes is enough. I beg you. You should know that no one wants to save Morgana more than I do. Kai did not follow King Uther's emotions, but still spoke calmly, with unusual calmness. Perhaps it was Kai's request, or Kai's attitude, that made King Uther hold back the tyranny gathered in his chest, and kept silent with a gloomy face. Seeing King Uther's attitude, Kai knew that he had acquiesced. But Kai did not waste time, but asked Wenger directly, I need you to tell me a few things. Don't be anxious. Speak calmly, slowly, and clearly. Don't have any doubts or omissions. Is that clear? Kai was a policeman in his previous life, and he did a good job, so investigating cases was one of his old professions. He was very familiar with this set of things. He knew that a lot of information provided by the assistant investigators was very important. Perhaps just a sentence or a word could affect the investigation of the case. It was also because of this that when Kai was handling the case, he would first let the assistant investigators calm down and not panic, so that more detailed clues could be obtained and omissions could be avoided. From this point of view, King Uther's behavior just now was a hindrance. Wenger was just a maid, not a strong woman. It was inevitable that she would be scared by King Uther's scare. But there was no way, he was the king, he was the biggest. So in order to calm Wenger down, Kai had to use a little trick. Kai directly used his mental power to help Wenger stabilize his emotions. This is not magic, but a simple use of the psychological suggestion Kai learned in his previous life and a simple application of his powerful mental power. To put it bluntly, it is worthless. But the effect is very good. Under Kai's comfort, Wenger actually found himself slowly calming down from the panic just now. Chapter 20 The Real Purpose. Feeling that Wenger's mood was close to stable, Kai immediately asked, Can you tell me, has Morgana had a conflict with anyone recently? This is the most common sentence during the investigation and questioning, because in many cases, the murderer did not plot for a long time before committing the crime, but was more of an impulse, which is generally called a crime of passion. This refers to the crime committed by the perpetrator in a moment of loss of reason and psychological imbalance at a specific time, space, environment, and conditions, due to a difference in one's mind. Most of these crimes are not premeditated, but often regardless of the consequences, with the characteristics of strong suddenness, extreme recklessness, great harm, and great regret after the crime. More than 90% of these suspects have no criminal record, in other words, they are ordinary people. Of course, Morgana's situation should not belong to this situation. Kai asked this question just in case. What if that person had a conflict with Morgana and was excited for a while? If you don't know about this kind of thing in advance, it will be easy to ignore it. Wenger didn't even think about it and answered directly, no. Everyone likes the princess, and the princess is also very nice, and she will never conflict with others. This is an expected answer, and Kai also knows this. But he asked just in case. Kai has already experienced Morgana's reputation in Camelot City in this month. This girl is liked by everyone, even the ant selling vegetables praises her highly. Morgana is polite and courteous to everyone. She never bullies others and often helps some vulnerable people in the city. She is definitely an angel on earth. Do you know if there is anyone who wants to hurt Morgana? Anyone, even a wrong look, can do it. Don't rush to answer me, think carefully first, Kai said word by word. His speech speed was not fast, and it could even be said that he was whispering. It was just to prevent Wenger from being nervous. After hearing this, Wenger immediately recalled it seriously, but after thinking for a long time, he still shook his head. As mentioned above, Morgana is almost an angel. Who would hurt her for no reason? Seeing Wenger's response, Kai immediately looked at King Uther and others. Your Majesty, what about you? Do you know? And Arthur, think about it carefully. King Uther was a little impatient, but for the sake of his daughter, He thought about it and said, Morgana is an angel, no one will hurt her. To be frank, there are many people in the city who want me dead, but Morgana? No one will hurt an angel. Arthur also shook his head. He couldn't think of anyone who would hurt Morgana. Kai nodded and said, then the motive is unclear. Morgana came to the palace when she was a few years old and had little contact with the outside world, so now we can basically rule out revenge. And Morgana has no economic dealings with the outside world, and it is even less likely to be because of money. But the murderer's actions were obviously premeditated. His target was Morgana from the beginning. So why Morgana? Kai didn't care about the reactions of others, but said to himself, what is the purpose of hurting Morgana? If you really want to attack Camelot, there is no need to hurt Morgana. Her death will not affect the kingdom. This is not to belittle Morgana, but a fact. The king of this kingdom is King Uther, and the heir is Arthur. Morgana's significance to the entire kingdom is very limited. She is just King Uther's adopted daughter. Even Kai's succession order is higher than Morgana. To put it bluntly, Morgana's death will only make King Uther, Kai, and Arthur sad for a while, nothing more. The murderer did so many things, naturally he would not just want to make them sad for a while. Is it possible that it is because of emotional problems? Kai turned his head and looked at King Uther and the others. Facing Kai's question, King Uther felt very uncomfortable, because Kai was too calm, so calm that he was a little cold-blooded, as if they were not talking about Morgana, but someone else. They couldn't understand how Kai could be so calm, not even a little excited, and even told them why others wanted to hurt Morgana without changing their expression. But fortunately, Kai has been like this since a long time ago, and he is always calm, so although they feel a little uncomfortable, they still think about Kai's question. Then everyone shook their heads firmly. Impossible. Morgana has been waiting for you all the time, and she has never been too close to anyone. It can't be an emotional problem, King Uther said with an ugly face. He now doubted his previous thoughts. Will Morgana really be happy with Kai? Kai is too calm. This is not the advantage of being a sweetheart. Kai naturally knew what they were thinking, but he didn't care. Because now he must stay calm. Panic and anger are never the way to solve problems. Only reason is the way to solve all problems. And things are not so bad that Kai will lose his calm. Others may not know, but Kai can see it very clearly. There is a force in Morgana's body that resists the erosion of the curse. Kai doesn't know what this force is, but he can feel that this force is very strong and harmless to Morgana. Besides, even if the worst happens in the end, Kai has a way to deal with it. Don't think that Kai has really just been traveling for the past 10 years. I don't think so either. So here comes the question. The murderer has no grudge against Morgana, and may not even have any connection with her. So what is his purpose? And he deliberately hides his tracks and doesn't want us to know it was him. Why did he do that? Kai quickly went through all the information in his mind and found that after eliminating all possibilities, there were only two possibilities left. One is that the murderer committed the crime randomly. He randomly chose a target and then committed the crime. This kind of criminal is the most hated by all investigators. They may have no motive at all, but simply want to commit a crime. Of course, correspondingly, this kind of criminal is actually very rare. At least Kai has been a policeman for 7 years and has never encountered one. Because the purpose and motivation always dominate people's behavior, this is logic. Lunatics without logic are rare everywhere. So this possibility is very low. Then there is only one possibility. After Kai's spirit reached 40 points, his thinking speed can be said to be amazingly fast. This series of thinking was completed almost in an instant. There is only one possibility I can think of. That is, the murderer's real purpose is not Morgana. No one expected that Kai would suddenly say such a sentence. A group of people looked at Morgana lying on the bed, and then looked at Kai, feeling a little puzzled. Gaius seemed to know something. Kai didn't care about their reactions, but asked Gaius very seriously, Gaius, I hope you can answer my question honestly. Do you have any way to cure Morgana? I mean any way. Gaius looked at Kai, and now he understood what Kai meant. So he said very frankly, no. The best I can do is to ensure that Morgana does not get worse in the next few days. As for the solution, I'm sorry, I don't have any way. After saying that, Gaius bowed slightly to King Uther to express his apology. At this time, King Uther would not blame Gaius. After all, this was caused by witchcraft. If Gaius really wanted to be responsible, it would be a bit far-fetched. so King Uther waved his hand as a response. And as a sensitive king, King Uther seemed to have come to his senses at this time. That's interesting. The murderer even figured out that Gwen could bring the flowers to Morgana. It's impossible that he didn't know about Gaius. Gaius came back yesterday, but he was not low-key at all. Everyone knows that the king held a banquet for him to welcome Gaius back. Knowing that Gaius, a master of medicine, was here, he dared to treat Morgana like this. It seems that he is very confident in himself and thinks he will never reveal his true intentions, Kai said, touching his chin. Arthur seemed to be listening to a book of heaven, and didn't understand what they were talking about. So he interrupted and said, "What's the truth? Witchcraft? Don't we know it?" Kai looked at his silly brother a little speechless. He was still so ignorant until now. What should he do in the future? King Uther also understood what Kai meant at this time. The murderer's target was not Morgana at all, at least not just Morgana. Kai's analysis before was very clear. The murderer used witchcraft. In Camelot, a wizard appeared, and he came with bad intentions. So there was no need to guess the purpose of the murderer. Over the years, King Uther has made many enemies outside because of magic and witchcraft. Some evil wizards want to destroy Camelot. On the other hand, a wizard who dares to attack the royal family, will his target really only be a princess who actually has little meaning to the entire king? How is it possible? No matter what, among the wizards, King Uther's hatred is higher than Morgana by an unknown percentage point. Moreover, although Kai didn't say a word, King Uther still understood. That is, if the murderer really wanted to kill Morgana, he didn't have to wait for them to be helpless here. All they can see now is Morgana's corpse. Since Morgana can be unconscious without anyone noticing, is it difficult to kill Morgana directly? Anyway, judging from the current situation, it is even easier to kill Morgana directly. His target must be King Uther and Arthur. Because any accident to either of these two people will shake the entire kingdom. Then the murderer has only one purpose for dealing with Morgana so painstakingly, and that is to get close to King Uther and Arthur. Because of this, Morgana's true situation must not be leaked. So the murderer must be very confident that Gaius can't see anything strange, and Morgana can't be killed. Otherwise, King Uther will be alert, and the murderer's plan will fail. After all, King Uther can still live well after hunting down wizards for so many years, so he naturally has his own trump card. Learn from Kai. Arthur, King Uther felt tired when he saw his stupid son. After all, he was still ignorant and insensitive even though it was so obvious. But after all, he was his own son, so King Uther was willing to teach him more, so he told him his guess. If Kai didn't find out that this was caused by witchcraft, and Gaius knew nothing about Morgana's situation, what do you think we would do? King Uther asked after telling his guess. This was also a test for Arthur. At this time, Arthur also understood what Kai meant by his previous weird talk. It turned out that the murderer's target from the beginning was King Uther or him. Morgana was just implicated. Chapter 21 Lure the snake out of its hole. Arthur thought for a moment and said, "We will not give up Morgana, this is certain, because neither King Uther nor Arthur is the kind of person who will easily change their decision. In short, they are both very stubborn. Want them to give up their loved ones easily? How is that possible? Even if Gaius sentenced Morgana to death, they would do their best to cure Morgana. We will use any method we can think of to cure Morgana. Arthur is smart after all, and at this time he roughly guessed the murderer's idea. At this time, even Merlin understood the plan of the wizard who cursed Morgana. King Uther is the king, and Arthur is Uther's biological son and the most orthodox heir to the entire Camelot. The security around the two of them is the most stringent, and it is extremely difficult for any stranger to approach them, not to mention those wizards with ulterior motives. So it is very difficult to deal with King Uther and Arthur directly, but Morgana is different. As for why it is different, I have said it before, so I won't repeat it here. In short, Morgana's defenses are the weakest in the entire Camelot royal family, and she is the easiest to be attacked. Moreover, she is favored by King Uther, and has a deep relationship with Arthur. Once it comes to her, these two people will naturally relax their vigilance, and this is the best time to get close to them. Think about it, if things develop just as the murderer expected. When Gaius is helpless, if someone runs to them and tells them that he can cure Morgana, will Arthur and King Uther still care whether this person is lying? Things have come to this point, King Uther and Arthur have no other choice, no matter whether it works or not, they have to try it. Doesn't this give the murderer a chance to get close? Seeing that everyone understood, Kai didn't add fuel to the fire, but talked about the follow-up. Your Majesty, I think the murderer will show up soon, so I hope you can spread the news that Morgana is seriously ill, and then pretend that you know nothing. You want the murderer to come to us by himself, and then, King Uther has been a king for 20 years, and he is still a little cunning. He was confused because of his concern before, but now that he understands the whole story, he naturally knows what to do. That's right, but I hope you don't rush to execute the murderer. Let's see what the murderer is planning first, Kai said sincerely. You mean, you want the murderer to cure Morgana? King Uther immediately realized Kai's plan. That's impossible. I won't let those dirty bastards touch Morgana again. King Uther was not at ease with a wizard with malicious intentions approaching Morgana again. He couldn't bear the blow of losing Morgana. But Kai didn't give in either, just looked at King Uther quietly. Seeing Kai's familiar eyes, King Uther suddenly didn't know what to say. Since childhood, Kai has been a good child, obedient, well-behaved, polite, and mature. Sometimes, King Uther even thought that Kai was too smart to be a child. But this did not mean that Kai was a submissive person. On the contrary, King Uther knew very well that Kai was very opinionated. Once he made a decision, few people could change it. Back then, King Uther did not allow Kai to leave Camelot to travel around the world. Kai had such a look at that time. He did not make a fuss, but was very calm. Then the next morning, he disappeared. After that, there was no news for 10 years. If Kai liked to make a fuss and express his opinions like Arthur, King Uther might have continued to insist, but seeing Kai's calm blue eyes, he did not insist as before. King Uther took a deep breath, and then said helplessly, "You must ensure that the bastard cannot continue to hurt Morgana." Of course, Kai smiled again. Then the atmosphere of the whole Camelot became extremely solemn, because the princess was seriously ill. Everyone was praying for this kind and beautiful princess, not only because of her great reputation in the city, but also because if Princess Morgana really met with an accident, they couldn't imagine what King Uther would do. But it was probably not a good reaction. After all, King Uther's reputation as a tyrant was accumulated by the heads that were chopped off. He would really kill people when he was angry. Moreover, King Uther's temper had obviously become much more irritable in the past 2 days. 5 servants had been severely punished by King Uther for making small mistakes. Now the whole city was shrouded in a dark cloud. It was also at this time that a man with his face hidden in a hood came to the palace, watching his plan go on perfectly with joy. King Uther's temper was very bad these 2 days. This was not acting, but really very bad. Every time he saw Morgana lying on the hospital bed, his heart seemed to be thrown into a frying pan, and it was extremely tormented. So those who made mistakes in front of him were in trouble. Even Kai was scolded by him. Arthur's life was not easy either. Originally, his sister Morgana's life or death was unknown, which made him very worried. But unexpectedly, at this point, his training not only did not stop, but was doubled. Kai felt that he was too young. If he accidentally exposed something and the murderer saw it, it would be bad, so he simply detained him in the training ground so that he had no time to think about it. What's worse is that Kai also detained Merlin and Wenger for the same reason, leaving them no chance to contact the outside world. The reason is similar to Arthur's, and King Uther is very satisfied with this. After all, only a few of them knew about this matter. Gaius was naturally trustworthy, but King Uther was not so patient with these 2 servants. It's best to know as little as possible about this kind of thing. However, Arthur didn't have to worry about the treatment of Merlin and Wenger. Kai only detained them, but didn't abuse them. Instead, he provided them with good food and drink. Except for the lack of freedom, everything else was no different from a holiday. Only Arthur was the most miserable. Fortunately, Kai was taking care of the unconscious Morgana in Morgana's room, so no one was really taking care of Arthur at the moment. In his upset state, Arthur finally found a chance to run out. He planned to go to the street to relax and see if he could run into the murderer. He always felt that waiting like this was not a good choice. He could take the initiative to find it. For his sister to recover, as a brother, isn't it reasonable to go out to find a treatment method? But Arthur didn't expect that he would be stopped as soon as he went out. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Edwin comes to your door. You mean a man named Edwin Moon has a panacea and wants to see me? And he also knows Morgana's situation. King Uther sat on the throne with a gloomy face. After hearing Arthur's report, he held the armrest of the throne tightly with his palms, and even his veins were exposed. Haha, what a coincidence. As Kai expected, the murderer jumped out by himself. Gaius frowned when he heard the name Edwin Moon. He always felt that he had heard it somewhere before, but he couldn't remember it. Arthur was very excited. He didn't expect that he would actually meet the murderer. Of course, he was not proud of this, but his own acting skills. Yes, I deliberately told him that there was Gaius in the palace, and there was no need for him, a quack with unknown origins, to worry about it. Then he swore to me that I would definitely go find him. It was definitely him. It was this Edwin Moon. He was the murderer. Arthur was really proud when he said this. Kai and King Uther were both worried that he was too young to show his hand, but he played hard to get and showed off in front of the murderer, making the guy still feel proud of himself. King Uther smiled when he heard Arthur's words. Well done, Arthur. It would be terrible if a king didn't have this kind of cunning. So King Uther was very satisfied with Arthur's response. Just after praising Arthur, King Uther looked around and found that Kai didn't come. So he asked his most trusted knight Leon, "Where is Kai?" "Sir, Kai is in the princess's room." He said he knew. Leon bowed and answered. Hearing this, King Uther was more satisfied. Although Kai was a little too calm before, which made him a little uncomfortable, now from Kai's actions, Kai didn't care about Morgana, but he knew the importance of things. Although it seemed a little cold-blooded at that time, it seems that this is a reliable performance now. A fool who can only scream and scream when encountering something can't be Morgana's husband. Well, let's ignore him for now. Arthur, go find that Edwin Moon. I want to summon him. I want to see how he plans to perform. King Uther was not in a hurry at this time. After all, there was Arthur's hard-to-get tactics first, and then there was Kai's confidence. As an elder and king, he couldn't be worse than the two juniors, right? It's just acting, as if everyone can't do it. Your Majesty, I am Edwin Moon, a pharmacist, and your loyal servant. This is a self-deprecating statement made by ancient commoners to nobles, a bit like the ancient Chinese saying humble or I am when introducing oneself. It doesn't mean that Edwin is King Uther's servant. The blond young man with half of his face severely burned knelt on one knee on the ground and respectfully handed over a document stamped with red beeswax. Knight Lion stepped forward, took the document, and then handed it to King Uther on the throne. King Uther opened the document, which showed an identity certificate given to Edwin Moon by another country, proving that he was a pharmacist, and also recorded some of his deeds. It was a bit like an ID card, but it was not impossible to forge it. It was just a document anyway, and it would be easy to make a seal on a carrot. So King Uther did not read it carefully. Welcome to Camelot. King Uther quickly threw the document to the knight beside him, and then asked eagerly, "Do you really have a panacea?" Edwin stood up very gracefully, and then said in an elegant tone, "I know all the medicines in the world and can cure all diseases, Your Majesty." This was a very generous young man, and his demeanor and manners made it easy for people to ignore the hideous burn marks on his face. Although his tone was humble, it was full of confidence. Even King Uther had to admit that he was an excellent young man. "I heard that Princess Morgana was ill. I would be honored if you allowed me to treat her." At this time, Gaius suddenly spoke. "You said you have a potion that can cure all diseases. Is it a panacea?" The panacea is a legend among pharmacists. Anyway, there are always such legends in every era, so it is not surprising. "Yes, but it is not as simple as you think." After saying this, he looked like he didn't want to communicate with people who didn't understand. King Uther felt a sense of evil at this time, pointing at Gaius and said, "This is the court pharmacist, Gaius." He wanted to see how the murderer would deal with Gaius's questions. Since the person had arrived, King Uther was not in a hurry. "Oh, I have heard of your name for a long time. It's nice to meet you." Edwin nodded slightly and acted as if he had heard of your name for a long time. When Gaius saw the young man in front of him, the sense of familiarity became stronger. "Have we met before?" Edwin smiled slightly, showing the ugly scour on his face a little, and then said with a wry smile, "If you have seen me, you will not forget me." Edwin seemed not to want to tangle with Gaius, but turned his head to look at King Uther and asked, "I am curious, what disease does the princess have?" Gaius answered before King Uther, brain infection. How do you prescribe it? Yarrow. Yes, yes, yes. Use rosemary to stimulate blood circulation in the brain. Inchusi. Very interesting. Edwin's words were somewhat teasing and mocking. Everyone could hear the meaning of this. Arthur couldn't help it at this time and asked, "What? Do you have any suggestions?" "No. No. That's good, it works," but Edwin immediately added another sentence. If the diagnosis is correct, this sentence means that Edwin does not agree with Gaius's diagnosis. "Then what is your diagnosis?" King Uther asked expressionlessly. "Well, before I diagnose the patient, I can't give the most accurate answer." After saying that, Edwin looked up at King Uther and Arthur and made his request. "I need my medical equipment." King Uther stood up and said, "Of course, you will get what you want." Then he waved his hand and asked the soldiers to move all of Edwin's things to the palace. "I will start my work immediately." Edwin bowed and said, "Where is Kai?" Just after Edwin came to the palace with his tools, he picked up a few boxes and went to Morgana's room. However, he did not allow anyone to watch his treatment. He said that he must concentrate and calm down when he was treating. Even Gaius was not allowed to be present. Although King Uther was very anxious, he had no choice before Morgana was well. When he left the room, King Uther immediately asked about Kai's situation. "Don't worry, Kai is in the servants' room in Morgana's room. He will always keep an eye on this guy," Arthur whispered in King Uther's ear. Hearing that Kai was secretly protecting Morgana, King Uther breathed a sigh of relief. With Kai inside, the chances of this guy doing something will be greatly reduced. This will also protect Morgana to the greatest extent. Let the others get ready. When Morgana is fine, kill that bastard. King Uther made a throat-cutting gesture to Arthur. Arthur didn't say anything, but nodded decisively. Chapter 23, Walking into a Trap. While Uther and Arthur were discussing, Gaius was a little absent-minded. He kept thinking about Edwin. Whether it was his appearance, name, or even his surname, it gave Gaius a very familiar feeling. Thinking of this, Gaius decided to investigate it himself. Only in this way could he feel at ease. As for why he was uneasy, even he himself didn't know. After talking to King Uther, Gaius rushed to the Grand Meester. There were the most detailed records of the entire Celtic countries, and there must be the answers he wanted. In the room, Kai hid in the maid's room and observed Edwin through the crack of the door. Kai found that this man really didn't mean to hurt Morgana. He only saw him tidying Morgana's hair with pity, and then said some sorry words, which roughly said that he didn't want to hurt Morgana and would heal her soon. Looking at him, he even seemed to be interested in Morgana. Kai was certainly unhappy about this, but he was able to tell the difference between the important and the unimportant. He did not jump out impatiently, but watched Edwin coldly as he treated Morgana. After a meaningless chatter, Edwin finally remembered his business. He took out a pair of tweezers and a white handkerchief, then carefully turned Morgana's head to the side and gently lifted the hair covering Morgana's ears. Then there was a burst of meaningless spells. Soon, a small beetle with blood crawled out of Morgana's ear. Edwin carefully caught the small beetle with a handkerchief, then gently picked up the small beetle with tweezers and gently put it into a small wooden box. The box was densely packed with identical small beetles. It can be seen that he himself seemed to be very afraid of those beetles. He held his breath tightly throughout the whole process, concentrating on holding the small beetle, for fear that he would accidentally drop the little devil in his hand. He was relieved until he closed the box. After completing this action, Edwin quickly recited the spell again and carefully wiped the blood from Morgana's ear with a handkerchief. During the whole process, Edwin did not notice that there was a pair of eyes staring at him in the room. This was not because Edwin was careless, but because our Lord Kai used a little trick to cover up his breath from the beginning. When Gaius returned to the scene with a heavy face, Edwin had just finished the treatment and pushed open the door and walked out. "Important news, Your Majesty." Edwin walked towards King Uther excitedly with a bloody handkerchief, and said proudly, "You will be very happy to know that the princess does not have encephalitis." King Uther stared at the handkerchief in Edwin's hand and said meaningfully, "What is that?" "Cerebral hemorrhage." "It's a cerebral hemorrhage." "My Majesty." Edwin did not notice King Uther's abnormality. He just glanced at Gaius with a grim face meaningfully, and then said a conclusion that was completely different from Gaius's previous diagnosis. But unlike what Edwin expected, when Gaius heard this conclusion, he not only did not refute, but closed his eyes and looked very sad. Since Edwin dared to come alone to seek revenge on King Uther, he was naturally a thoughtful person. Seeing Gaius's face was different, he immediately felt something was wrong. At this time, Morgana's door opened again not far away, and a young knight with blonde hair and blue eyes walked out. The knight nodded to King Uther and said, "Morgana is fine now." As soon as the voice fell, a large number of knights and guards rushed out from all directions, protecting King Uther and others behind them. By now, Edwin didn't know that he was exposed. At the same time, he also thought that King Uther and his men had such courage that they let him enter the palace and treat Princess Morgana, even though they knew his identity. Of course, none of this is important now. The important thing is that he was foolishly tricked, not only sending himself to the enemy's knife, but also helping to heal Morgana. He lost miserably from the beginning to the end. "Edwin, your scar has healed. I often wondered what happened to that poor boy, but I didn't expect, why did he come back?" Edwin. Gaius looked at the surrounded Edwin and finally couldn't help but speak. "I remember," I said, "we have never met." Edwin saw that he was surrounded, but he didn't seem panicked, but said with interest, "Muin. This is your mother's maiden name. I should have thought of it long ago. You are the son of Greg and Yaden. After all, apart from the burns, you are still very similar to when you were a child," Gaius said with compassion. Edwin, who has always been neither humble nor arrogant, and elegant, immediately flashed with hatred and anger in his eyes when he heard the names of Greg and Yaden. "They are your friends, Gaius, but they are wizards." Gaius put away his compassion and became expressionless again. Because he knew that at this moment, even if he wanted to save the child, he couldn't do it. He attacked the princess with witchcraft and planned to continue to hurt King Uther. His crime was irreparable. Haha, really? They did no magic, but many people knew it at that time, and they didn't plan to use their magic to do anything. But because you turned a blind eye, they died in the hands of this tyrant. You had the opportunity to save them, but you didn't. You watched them burn to death in front of me. Are you really their friend? You don't deserve to mention their names, Edwin said sarcastically. Enough. Just when Gaius was about to say something, King Uther stood up and interrupted their conversation directly. King Uther didn't care about the origin of this murderer. He only knew that he had to die. For Morgana and for Camelot. Kill him. King Uther didn't give Edwin a chance to continue speaking, and directly ordered him to be executed. Following King Uther's order, the soldiers who had been prepared immediately released their arrows. They planned to shoot this evil wizard to death with arrows. Facing the arrows flying at him, Edwin smiled contemptuously, then waved his sleeves, and all the arrows stopped in the air. Without waiting for others to react, Edwin uttered a very short spell, and then all the arrows flew back. Fortunately, there were knights holding shields in the front row for defense, otherwise, there would be heavy losses. Chapter 24 Kill. As everyone began to dodge the arrows flying back, Edwin chanted a spell again, and a wall of fire rose up instantly, blocking everyone. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Edwin immediately turned around and prepared to return to Morgana's room. He wanted to hold Morgana hostage in order to have a chance of survival. Even if he couldn't escape in the end, he could take Morgana with him to be buried. Although it was very ungentlemanly to do so, and he knew that Morgana had nothing to do with this matter from beginning to end. Edwin asked himself that he was not a bastard. He had never wanted to drag innocent people into revenge from beginning to end. Even Gaius, he just wanted to use his misdiagnosis to exclude him from the court and keep him away from right and wrong. But at this point, he had no choice. What he could do now was to let King Uther experience the feeling of having his loved ones die in front of him. Seeing Edwin rushing towards Morgana's room, Arthur immediately prepared to rush through the wall of fire to chase him, but King Uther stopped him immediately. "Don't worry, Kai is there." He was very confident in Kai in his words. Edwin chose to return to Morgana's room, naturally because there were no soldiers surrounding Morgana's room, and there was only one knight standing there. In comparison, the chances here were much greater. And that knight was naturally Kai. Seeing Edwin rushing over, Kai sighed. Wizards were the most troublesome. As long as these people gave them a little loophole, they could use some strange abilities to make you miserable, and even lose your life in serious cases. So the best way to deal with wizards is to do like King Uther, find a bunch of people, see the wizard and say nothing, just shoot him to death with arrows, and put an end to it. What's worse is that with so many people watching, many of Kai's methods can't be used. He doesn't want to use witchcraft-like abilities in front of King Uther, which would test the relationship between him and King Uther too much. Based on Kai's life experience, he knows that feelings are the most difficult to test. As long as you are a person, You will have your own ideas, and not everyone will make decisions based on feelings. But now that the wizard has rushed in front of him, Kai can only go. Fortunately, his superb physical fitness made him the best warrior in the entire British Isles, even without those shady means. Putting away those random thoughts, Kai drew out the double swords at his waist. He crossed the double swords in front of his chest as a salute. Get out of the way. Seeing a knight blocking in front of him, Edwin certainly didn't want to get entangled with him, so he planned to use telekinesis to throw the knight away. But at the moment he used telekinesis, the knight slid and started, and the whole person rushed in front of him like an arrow from a string. Before Edwin could react, the knight's double swords that were crossed in front of his chest crossed forward and crossed, cutting Edwin's neck like a pair of scissors. The knight's speed was so fast that Edwin only felt a chill on his neck, and the whole person fell into darkness. So energy get. Kai turned his head and looked at Edwin's headless body falling to the ground, shaking his head. From the reaction of this wizard just now, it can be seen that he is a half-baked. It's okay to use those fancy witchcraft to bully ordinary people. To deal with a master. No. Not to mention a master, even an ordinary knight can take him down as long as he is prepared. Magic is not invincible. In battle, what matters is comprehensive quality. Knowing magic alone does not mean anything. Otherwise, the situation of the wizards now would not be like this. Kai? What's going on outside? What happened? At this time, Morgana, who had just woken up, also noticed the noise outside the room and asked with some concern. Oh, it's okay. Everyone heard that you woke up, so they were a little excited. Kai responded to Morgana's room while waving his hand for the soldiers to come and clean up quickly. A lady's room does not need these dirty things around it. I'll ask them to keep their voices down. After all, you just woke up and are still very weak. You must rest. The news of Princess Morgana's recovery quickly spread throughout the city, and everyone was relieved when they heard the news. As for what disease Princess Morgana had, no one knew, and no one cared. After all, the most important thing was that Princess Morgana was fine. So no one knew that a pharmacist named Edwin had treated the princess. Even Morgana herself didn't know there was such a person. She only knew that she was too tired from the banquet the night before, and she caught a cold, so she fell into coma. Although Morgana didn't think that she would fall into coma because of a small cold, the facts were there, and she couldn't refute it. So Morgana could only stay in bed for 2 days to recuperate at the request of King Uther and Kai. Among them, King Uther was simply worried about Morgana's physical condition, fearing that there would be any sequelae or something like that might affect Morgana for life. So King Uther asked guys to check Morgana's body at least 5 times a day to ensure that she would not have any accidents. Kai was different. He knew that there was nothing wrong with Morgana's body. On the contrary, her body was better than she had ever been. Remember the mysterious power that Kai found in Morgana before? That mysterious power had been fighting against a curse on Morgana, so Morgana's body did not show any discomfort after falling into coma. And now that the curse has disappeared, the mystery has not only not disappeared with it, but has become even stronger. Kai asked Morgana to recuperate just to observe this power. Kai couldn't be sure what this power was, where it came from, whether it was good or bad, and what effect it would have on Morgana. In the case of all uncertainties, Kai felt that it was better to be cautious. More importantly, Uther couldn't know about this. Uther was a die-hard anti-magic element. Because of what happened in the past, Uther believed that magic was evil. Anyone or anything related to magic must be eliminated. If Uther knew that his beloved daughter was related to magic. In short, no matter what the result was, it would not be very good. Since he knew this, Kai certainly couldn't let this happen. Although other father-daughter relationships could not be considered as loving father and filial son, they were definitely not bad. So why let this kind of family relationship go through hardships? Kai didn't have any hobbies of tax evasion. Morgana and Uther were fine like this, without all those twists and turns and hardships. So Kai had to figure out what this was and find a way to cover up its impact. Chapter 25 Nightmare and Talent. On the 5th day, Morgana was awakened by a nightmare again at night. Morgana screamed and sat up from the bed, which also woke up Kai beside her. Dear, Kai looked at Morgana, who was sweating and terrified, and his heart sank all of a sudden. Kai hugged Morgana tightly in his arms and gently stroked her back. Let her relax her nervous mood a little. Kai? I dreamed again. I dreamed that Arthur drowned in the water. I don't understand why I dreamed of these, but it was very real, I even saw the murderer who drowned Arthur. Kai? I was really scared, Kai's arm seemed to give Morgana strength, allowing her to calm down a little. Since Morgana woke up, she would dream the same dream every time she slept. In the dream, she saw a lake. Arthur, under the guidance of a woman, slowly approached the lake, and then sank to the bottom of the lake in the woman's sweet smile. Morgana saw it clearly. Arthur did not resist. On the contrary, he had the same sweet smile, as if everything was voluntary. But this was not normal. Who would willingly drown themselves? In the first 2 days, Morgana thought it was just her nervousness, but as time went by, the dream became more and more frequent and clearer. Now Morgana could even remember the appearance of the woman. That was a dream. Generally speaking, the scenes in the dream are basically forgotten when you wake up the next day. At most, you can remember some vague plots. But Morgana remembered every detail clearly, which was very abnormal. Morgana thought it was an omen. Don't be afraid, Kai patted Morgana's back gently like coaxing a child to relax her. With me here, no one can hurt Arthur. Believe me, although this was not the first time she heard such words, every time Morgana heard Kai say this, she felt inexplicably relaxed. Maybe Kai was the only one who would believe her. She once told Gaius about her dream, but Gaius did not believe it. He just said that she was overthinking and gave her some sleeping pills. His only advice was to tell her not to tell anyone else, including King Uther. It seemed that Gaius did know something, but he didn't want to say it. Fortunately, he also knew to tell Morgana not to tell anyone else. But what Gaius didn't know was that Morgana told Kai about this. Be good. It's still early, go to sleep for a while. From today on, I will tie Arthur to my belt and take him with me wherever I go. Don't worry. Looking at Morgana now, Kai knew that Gaius's sleeping pills didn't work. Morgana's dream came from her talent, a talent similar to the prophecy of a prophet. Kai met such people when he traveled around the world. These prophets can see some fragments of the future. However, for these fragments, the prophets themselves have many different understandings. Some prophets believe that the future cannot be changed, while others believe that there are tens of millions of possibilities in the future. What they see is just one of the more likely possibilities. But no matter which one it is better to keep the prophets' predictions in mind, because they are generally very accurate. With Kai's comfort, Morgana finally calmed down and fell asleep soon. This prophetic dream had a very serious mental oppression on Morgana, which made her mentally very bad. In addition, Kai secretly used a little trick, so she fell asleep so quickly. Looking at Morgana with a steady breathing, Kai knew that it seemed that he had to go to the dragon cave. These days, Kai tried many methods to suppress Morgana's talent. Unfortunately, I don't know if it was because of the mismatch between the majors, resulting in many methods that Kai learned outside having no effect on Morgana. Therefore, Kai could only seek help from the guy who knew Celtic magic very well. Coincidentally, this guy is now in Camelot. The next morning, Kai walked out of Morgana's room. The servants and guards on the road saw Kai, and they did not show any strange expressions. Instead, they took it for granted. Because as early as the day Morgana fell into coma, Kai moved into Morgana's room and never moved out again. No one believed that Kai had been going to be a saint every night during the days he lived there. Whatever was going to happen had happened earlier. It's a bit hypocritical to still care about this now. Didn't you see that even King Uther didn't say a word about Kai and Morgana living together? The fact is indeed so. Everything that should have happened between Kai and Morgana happened. On the second day of Morgana's consecutive nightmares, Morgana was awakened by a nightmare in the middle of the night. Kai went to comfort her, and then. They are both adult men and women, and they have feelings for each other. Whatever happened is normal. Kai did mention to King Uther the next day that he planned to move out with Morgana. After all, the relationship has progressed to this point, and it's time to get married. Anyway, Kai has no hope of going home, so he might as well live a good life here. Both Morgana and King Uther are sincere to him, and he can't let them down. But King Uther did not agree with Kai's proposal. He actually persuaded Kai that there is no rush to get married and it can be delayed for 2 years. Kai understood what King Uther meant. He didn't want Morgana to leave him so soon. Once Kai and Morgana got married, Morgana would no longer be suitable to live in the palace in any way. Seeing King Uther's eager eyes, Kai couldn't refuse his father-in-law's expectations, so he could only bite the bullet and continue to get along with him in such an ambiguous way. What else could he do? His father-in-law didn't want his daughter to get married so soon. How could Kai, an adopted son who grew up in his father-in-law's house, refuse? Passing through the corridors of the palace, Kai soon arrived at the training ground. Arthur and Merlin were already waiting there. After this period of training, Arthur was used to the schedule Kai set for him and no longer needed Kai to urge him. But it was still beyond Kai's expectation that they could come so early today. Kai, seeing his brother-in-law and brother, Arthur immediately greeted Kai with full energy. "Well, have you warmed up? If you are done warming up, go for a run." "Do you still need me to teach you this?" Kai didn't give Arthur a good face, and scolded him with a cold face. Children of Arthur's age are extremely lively. If you treat him with a little kindness, he will dare to take advantage of you. So when it comes to serious matters, Kai never treats Arthur with kindness, just to make him understand when he can fool around and when he should be serious. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.